Corner, Central University.
Hello.
Rajasthan.
Central University, Rajasthan. So we have few people. उधर आ जाओ, सामने बैठे. While think Professor Dossani, Chana sir, am I audible to them? Okay. Good morning to all of you. From 15 remote locations. As Dr. Dossani is in the process of putting his presentation, so let me welcome you all to this fourth session of engaging with the global best. We started this exercise of inviting people from overseas, and by using video conferencing facilities, connecting it to our educational institutions throughout the country. I'm very happy to inform you all that today we have 15 remote locations with us, from all over the country, and I can see that in some of the institutions, I think it is a house full. We have over 50 participants I can see in NIT Surat, and which other location? Central University of Punjab, Gujarat. This is extremely useful. I think using technology, we are able to reach out experts, global experts, to a very large number of people. Since this is going to be a somewhat different kind of a session, more about capacity building over three important areas of higher education activity. One is faculty development, second is institutional governance, and technology development. So I'll basically hand over to Dr. Rafiq Dossani. In course of these sessions, Secretary of the Planning Commission, Dr. Sindhu, will also join us for some time, and hope you find these sessions useful. We'll also, try to put these presentations online for benefit of all of us, and send you by email as well. So again, welcome you all, and over to Dr. Dossani, please. Dr. Dossani, a little brief introduction, because the introduction of Dossani is already circulated to you. Important thing is that he is now with the RAND Corporation. Earlier he was director of Stanford Center for South Asia and a senior research scholar at Stanford University. He's PhD from the Northwestern University. He has done some comparative work on higher education in the BRIC countries, and his book with Martin Carnoy and others is going to be released by published by Stanford University Press in 2013. This year it's coming out. Okay. Over to Dr. Rafiq Dossani.
Should I just use that?
Yeah. No, it's, you don't have to.
Just talk.
Oh, yes.
Okay, good morning, everybody. Thank you for being here. Thank you, Dr. Agarwal, for inviting me. There are 3 presentations that I will be doing today. It's quite a long session, so it's important that you also enjoy it and not just listen to me all the time. And so I would welcome questions. I don't know how questions would be welcome.
Yeah.
Somebody's talking. Yes? Oh, okay. So if somebody can put up their hands, then we can see, then we can answer questions. Is that how?
Yeah. We'll
okay.
go to the question mode.
And actually, at one point in one of the sessions, there's a short workshop where it's more like a thinking exercise. So we'll get them to do that. So I begin with faculty development. Faculty development is something that has many meanings. The way I'm using it is, first, how do you plan as an institution, saying that if I've got this program, and I'll use an MBA program as an example because it's compact, it's easier to do. And the idea is that the question you ask is, well, if I want to do an MBA program, organize one, how do I organize it in terms of faculty planning? And I'll take it through various steps. One is from institutional size to number of faculty, to class load, and then to think about how to make sure that the faculty is properly trained in conveying the information or teaching properly, and also doing research. But what you should, I think the first point important to understand is that institutions are built around the teaching function. So nobody begins an institution saying what will be the research load of the faculty. They always begin the institution by asking, well, we will have these many students, and we want to have this sort of teaching function. So the teaching function is primary. Now, for all of those of you who follow technology closely, you would know that there are many things are happening which are making the institution existence itself questioned. For example, the massive open online course, the MOOC as it's called, is something where you can deliver courses remotely. Hundreds of thousands of students can enroll for the course, and that questions place-based education. So this, it's controversial as to whether this will replace, the MOOC will replace place-based education. My assessment, and we can discuss it later, is that it will not. But at least for the foreseeable future, the institution will continue. And so around that framework, I'll be discussing faculty development planning. Okay, so the first item I will take up is, how do you size the faculty?
Channa sir, can they see the presentation?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so now Channa Sahib and his colleagues will move it ahead as I instruct them. So stay on this one. Yeah, you can move ahead to this one.
To the next one.
Next slide, please. So if you compare with the United States and India, you see somewhat of a difference in the structuring of the institution. And there are many things that we can discuss around this, but I'll just pick those that are relevant to faculty planning. And if you have questions, we can discuss them later. The first is, you see that in terms of size, the average institution in the United States is significantly larger. Typically, you'll have a 10-to-1 faculty ratio for that size of institution. So you have 500 faculty and 5,000 students. The Indian ratio is around 15:1, and that is even mandated by compliance. And in our study, we found that institutions, the book that Dr. Agarwal referred to, where we looked at over 100 institutions in our sample study, we found that this 15:1 ratio is very strictly adhered to. Now, if you look at how the studies break up, you see that in the United States, the job-oriented fields, that is business studies, social sciences, health sciences, engineering, are the largest components. So together they make up 20%, 10%, 8%, and 5%. So that's about 43%, or nearly half. And then you can say the rest is humanities, social, natural sciences, undeclared majors. Undeclared majors is about 1/4 of that percentage. So, what's interesting here is that people often say that if you want to pursue your dream, you can do it in a rich country, not in a developing country. But that's not true. In the United States as well, people look at careers when they choose their majors. And this is, by the way, these are undergraduate percentages. At the graduate level, it would be much more focused on careers, of course. And the corresponding for India is also for the undergraduate. Now, social sciences, of course, as I put in that note below, consists of many fields. This includes economics, anthropology, education, linguistics, political science, international relations, sociology, geography, law, and psychology. And humanities is languages, literature, history, philosophy, religion, visual, and performing arts. Now, moving to the right column, for India, we see also here that the career-oriented fields predominate. Of course, people often argue that in India, if you had better provision of the career-oriented fields, that percentage would be even higher. So that the arts, social science, humanities, which are shown as 41.5%, is sort of like a residual. When people can't get in here, they go in there. And these are not viewed as job-oriented fields, whereas in the United States, social sciences is viewed as a job-oriented field because there are plenty of jobs. You finish an undergraduate in economics there, you can get a job very quickly in a think tank and start building your career. So that's an interesting point of view that I think over the long term, what we are seeing in India is a much greater demand for social science graduates. And certainly in education as well. So you can see there's not that much difference in the career orientation between the two countries. By the way, locally it's easy for you to ask questions, so please interrupt me at any point and we can discuss. So scale, you can see scale, okay, 5,000 against 500. Now why is this important? So scale is important because then you can organize your curriculum more accurately. So if you're a very small institution, you'll often have to use part-timers to do particular courses because there's not enough demand for a full-timer to teach that course over the year. So it's a very specific course like critical thinking or communication. Often you rely on part-timers. Very often the tendency is that part-timers will also play the role of teaching sort of the commoditized courses in a sense. They're called commoditized because they're the core courses, they're the beginning courses for large numbers of students. And of course there's no restriction on that in India, but in terms of regulation, and even the institutions seem to favor that. But if you see in the United States, actually these are the courses in which they insist that the full-time faculty be the teacher. So even though it's a messy course, may have 500, 800 students in one big huge auditorium, although that size is rare, it's insisted on that those courses be taught by full-time tenured or tenure-line faculty. And you can see why, but these are the courses where the students get their basic grounding. So from a faculty planning, my submission would be that this is something that's really quite important for Indian institutions also to consider and potentially adopt. It's not that in the United States they don't use part-time faculty. They do in a huge number. In fact, 70% of the contact hours of students in the United States is with a part-time faculty member. Only 30% is with a tenure line or full-time faculty, but that 30% is focused on the core courses. Okay, so scale therefore is important because if you want enough full-time faculty for teaching these, the basic courses, which typically cover the first 2 years of a degree, then you have to have enough faculty members, and to justify a large number of faculty members within a proper ratio, you need a large number of students. So over time, through experimentation and so on, at least for the United States, that number has worked out to, as you see, 5,000 students and 500 faculty members. And that's something I think we should look at seriously here, say, well, what is the optimal or desired size of an institution, and try and figure out. And I'm going to go through an exercise to help you think through that in a moment. The other advantage of scale, of course, is that you can offer many more kinds of courses. So as we are moving to a world where we recognize that you can't anymore spend 80-85% of the contact hours of the student just in doing the major engineering. For example, I think I have a slide later on that. In India, in our studies, we found that over 80% of the courses taken relate to the major, whereas in the United States it is just about half and half. And so, you know, that gives a certain diversity of approach. You can take many courses, broaden your points of view. All of you would remember the McKinsey NASCOM report where they said that one of the shortfalls of the engineering student is project management, communication skills, global thinking. These things come when you take humanities courses. And I know that the 5-year plan has put a lot of emphasis on these sorts of issues. Okay, so let's get a little more detail. Next slide, please, into the scale issues. So the scale of the institution depends, of course, on the goals. Where do you want to locate? What do you want to teach? How important is the research component? The student coverage, the levels at which you'll be teaching, and of course the cost structure. So, because of, I won't go into great detail into any of these. I'll rather launch into an example right away to discuss this in some detail, discuss sort of the practical issue in some detail. So I'll start by taking an MBA program and comparing it in the US and in India. Okay, so next slide, please. Okay, this is a busy slide. I'm not sure all of you can read it. I hope so, but I will read it out for you. So the MBA program is the sort of standard one is a 2-year degree program in which in the first year you take certain compulsory courses and the second year you start to specialize through in particular fields. Now, although in India we see many fields that are considered majors, there's international relations, there's marketing management major. So actually, in my opinion, these are actually taking a student away from. Okay, and just continue.
Yeah.
Okay. And so there are really only 4 fields in management that count. And everything else is just built around these 4. And these 4 were pretty much set into stone about 100 years ago when the first MBA programs came out, and they haven't changed since. So that's sort of interesting, isn't it? That these 4 specializations, finance, marketing, production, and HR, human resources, are really the 4 fields around which every single MBA program in the world is structured, although whatever they may call it. Now, in these 4 fields, so typically what happens is that the students will take basic courses in all of these. Okay, so as you can see what I've written after that, there are 4 courses each. There's basic, advanced, electives, and independent study. Okay, so when you start your MBA program, you'll be taking initially in your first year 4 basic courses, 1 in each of these: marketing, finance, production, and HR. And then you'll take a set of foundation courses in the first year. Then in the second year, you'll take an advanced course in each of these, and then you move to taking electives. This, by the way, is based on semester system, and then I'll give you some comparisons with the quarter system. Because still in many IIMs and so on are using the quarter system here. Although I know we are generally moving towards semester. Okay, so the 4 courses are basic, advanced, electives, and independent study. Then if you look at the second bullet, apart from the 4 specializations, the students are required to take foundation courses. So that is 1 in each of the following 12. Communication, critical thinking, information management, managerial economics, organization behavior, quantitative methods, planning policy and strategy, globalization, legal systems, ethics, economic systems, and macroeconomics. So these are 12 courses. Now out of these, 5 are compulsory. So those 5 are critical thinking, managerial economics, quantitative methods, planning policy and strategy, and ethics. And the rest you have a choice. You have to take 8. So as a student you take these 5 and then you can choose among the other 3. Now, of course, it sounds like the way I'm talking as if this is completely standardized across every institution. That's not the case. This is something that has evolved over time, and MBA is interesting from that point of view because it's not a certification. Unlike say an architect or an engineer, where when you finish, the BE certifies you to do something as an engineer. MBA is completely an uncertified course. It sort of just enables you to work in a variety of fields of management. But still, over a period of time, if you look across the United States, you find this structure has evolved as sort of the final point. And this is what you observe. So total that I've listed are 12 foundation courses and 16 specialization courses. So a total of 28 courses consisting of compulsory and basic courses. Typically, if you have about 150 students, they'll have 3 sections each. And a total of, so if you divide that out, you get total number of 55 offerings per batch. That is, for every batch that enters while they go through their 2 years, they will have options or be taking courses from a selection of 55 courses. So the course catalog would consist of 55 courses. Local people, am I going too fast? Is it okay?
No, I think it's fine.
Speed is okay, okay? Okay. All right. So, now what does this mean in terms of planning the student?
Maybe when you are halfway through this presentation, we can take a few questions,
Okay. Good
if
idea.
it is broken into 2 or 3 parts, So
I will
it might
do
be
that.
useful so that we understand whether they are listening or they are able to get what you're saying.
Yeah, very important. So I will do that.
Yeah.
So say another 5-10 minutes.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So what is this? On the right side, you see the impact on this faculty and student body. So typical student takes, and each course in the semester system is 4.5 credits. So it varies between 4 and 5 and 3 and 6, but average is 4.5. So first year you take 4 basic and 8 foundations, so 12 courses. Second year you take 4 advanced, 2 major electives, independent study, which goes for 1 full year, 2 course sequence, plus 4 non-major electives, which you can choose from any courses that are of those 55 that are offered. Okay, so that's, I think, pretty standard over here also, although there's some variation. I'll come to an example. I have some data from IIM Indore that I used to prepare this for the India example. The faculty, now here, this is actually a very interesting question, because you can somehow manage by taking fewer faculty. So even though people recognize that 15:1 student-faculty ratio is actually a very good ratio in terms of managing a system, still they take a little bit extra if they can, because you don't want to have too few faculty per discipline. Otherwise that person will think of running away, right? Because if you have only one person teaching banking, for example, and there's nobody he or she can talk to, then his research output would suffer. So typically what you'll find is the general rule of thumb is minimum 4 per discipline. By discipline I'm referring to these 4 specializations: finance, marketing, production and HR, and 1 for every 2 foundation courses, and a total of 20 faculty members. So this gives you your 300 student typical MBA program over 2 batches, 150 students per batch, and a teaching load, if you divide it out, of 5.5 courses on average per faculty member per year. Now this seems high to some and low to some. When I share these numbers, the IIM people, I can see IIM Udaipur is here, have lower loads than that, and then others have higher loads, 6 to 8. But across the US, this is the average, 5.5 courses per annum. And the average course enrollment for the basic or compulsory foundation courses, it's 50 is the enrollment per class, so it's quite large and similar to what we find here in India. And once you go beyond the basic, that is the first year classes, and you go to the advanced and the optional electives, then it comes down to 25. Okay, next slide please, and after this slide I'll open up for some discussion and questions. So now I'm going to compare with IIM Indore. So if you look at the left side, what you are seeing is, and what I did, I took that US data of the previous one, which was semester-based data, and converted it on a 3:2 ratio to a quarter-based system. 3 quarters, 3 quarters of teaching in a year. Okay, 3 terms in a year. So the first year in the US is 6 basic, 12 foundation. Second year, 6 advanced, 3 electives, 1 independent study running for the full year, plus 6 non-major electives. Okay, now I compare with IIM Indore, which also has a 3-term system. And they have this sectional division, which is 75 students per section, 6 sections. First year they are taking 12 basic plus 16 foundation. Second year, 8 advanced, 8 major electives plus 8 non-major electives. So now you can see some differences. What you can see is that first is that they're taking more courses in Indore than they're taking in the US. By quite a bit, I mean, there's quite a significant difference, and we can discuss about this. Secondly, you see that in year 1, there's a compulsory foundation courses. So whereas in India, the foundation courses are required in all. In the US, they give some options within the foundation. So you get a choice. You have to choose between a certain number of foundation courses. As you in the last example, you might remember, I listed 12 foundation courses which you have to take at least 5. Okay, and then the second difference I found is that, or a third difference is that in India the independent study is optional, and you can either take courses or you can take the independent study. But in the United States, it's compulsory that you take this independent study, and that is something akin to the, in engineering, the capstone or the design course that you do in the 4th year. Here also in MBA, the thinking is that you need this design course which gets you interacting with the real world, and therefore you must have the independent study. Okay, so I mean, to summarize before I go on to faculty planning in another sense, which is, how do you train faculty? This part that I tried to cover so far was to say that for those planning an institution, this provides in a sense a framework in which to think about how to gear the institution. How do you think of students, how do you think of courses, and then how do you think of how many faculty to have? So I will stop here and...
Yeah, and I think we can take a few questions, and we are really excited that, so many people from Central University of, Gujarat, Punjab are here, Central University of Punjab. So, yes, we would like to have 1 or 2 questions. One question from Central University of any comments, remarks, and, Rafiq, we will circulate your slide. Yeah. Central University of Punjab.
Is there any analysis on other European universities?
You can start. Yes, please.
Any analysis done for European universities?
Have you done any analysis for European universities?
Yes. So in England, I've looked at engineering colleges, not MBA programs. So, what was your question about Europe?
No, he just wants to know whether analysis has been done for
okay.
Europe.
Yeah. I mean,
any significant differences between the US and Europe?
So, I don't feel fully qualified to answer this. I've studied MBA programs globally. So I've looked at INSEAD and some of the better European programs, and they are modeled on the American system, as best I know.
Okay. So there is no, in the MBA programs, there is no significant difference between the Europe and American
That's right.
system. Yeah.
There's no significant difference. In engineering, interestingly, the British program is closer to the Indian in terms of how it is designed. Much more focus on the majors, but in MBA it's the US model, because I think that was invented there, you know, the MBA program.
I think I
Sir, how
Yes,
How
yes,
you-
Aisha Mohali. Yes, yes.
Yeah, I had a question. You see, when you say planning faculty, one of the big issues faced by most institutions is we could take more students, but we won't be able to find the faculty who can teach all of them. So you struggle to get faculty, and that is actually holding us back from taking more students. I mean, it's rather than the other way around. If we wanted to take more students, we would have a teacher ratio of 50 to 1. But we won't be able to find faculty that easily.
This is a reality of India, I think, and I'll come in the next section to looking at faculty development. My own view is that there are plenty of good faculty there, but they're not well motivated or trained. It's not that difficult to train someone over a period of 1 year even to become a good teacher. But because there's such a high reliance on part-timers who have no loyalty to the institution at which they teach, that the quality of teaching tends to be very poor. They're poorly remunerated. They move around to 2 or 3 institutions to make an income, and that really ruins the quality of teaching. Whereas the quality, it's not that difficult to upgrade a teacher.
No, Rafiq, you were, I think, sharing with me statistics on these casual teachers or issue of part-timers in the US higher education. Can you elaborate that a little bit? Because we tend to feel that the issue of ad hoc and part-time teachers is unique to India.
I want to ask a question.
How significant is their proportion in US?
Actually, I mentioned it here also a short while ago, which is that in the United States, 70% of the students' contact hours is with a part-time teacher. So it's huge. But the difference there and here is that these part-time teachers are all highly educated PhDs in the United States. It's because of budgetary reasons that the institutions are not hiring them as full-time people. So they get away by paying them, and they pay them very little. The average salary per course, so they're paid by the course. The average wage per course for a part-time teacher for teaching for a semester is $2,900. Okay, that's lower than a full-time teacher gets here. By comparison, so the full wage of a part-time teacher in the US is about $12,000. He teaches about 4 to 5 courses, and that's what he or she earns. $12,000 a year, which is why they must teach in 3 or 4 institutions and teach many courses. It's not uncommon. I know one person who teaches in Berkeley College in New York, Indian lady. She is teaching 16 classes a year. 16 a year, because that's the only way she can survive. Whereas a full-time teacher, average salary in America. Okay, let me ask you to guess. Gentleman who asked the question, what's the average salary for a full-time tenure line teacher? Just the average across all fields.
In the United States.
In the United States.
Any guesses? NIT Surat, you have a large number of participants. We are extremely grateful to you that there is so much of enthusiasm in NIT Surat. Any guesses from NIT Surat? Dr. Ardintu Saha.
Let me throw them off a bit with a statistic which is incorrect for the average, which is the average starting salary at Stanford University School of Business for a new fresh faculty member is $250,000. Okay. So now what's the average for the US as well?
$250,000.
$250,000.
That is average for
Stanford only.
Stanford Business
School entering faculty. But now I'm asking for average of all faculty in the US, senior, junior, just average.
350 lakhs.
$350,000.
No, it's much less than that.
60,000 to 70,000.
Any other guesses?
I'll ask a question and interrupt from SPA Bhopal.
Yes.
When last year there was a group of vice chancellors who visited India Yale Leadership Initiative, and we could come to know that it's something between, yes, as sir was saying, $180,000 to $220,000 per annum. But this is only for those who are stationed at university. But there's a question attached with it, that what happens to student-teacher ratio at that point of time? Because when we are talking about 15:1, are all these teachers are within this ratio, or it is little different? And in our case, when we have this 10:1, should or can we include part-time teachers in that, or is it included in other universities? Sir.
Okay. So I'll answer your question about that. So let me first give you the answer for the average. So the average is 60,000. Okay, 60,000. 60,000.
Average 60,000.
$60,000 per year is the average earning for a full-time tenured or tenure line faculty member.
If you want to look at the comparative picture of salaries throughout the world, Boston College and Institute of Economics in Russia, they have done a study, and that study is available on the website. We have also referred to it in our 12th plan document. I'll send you the link. So you have a look at it. You are not poorly placed internationally as far as salaries are concerned. But yes, there are huge differences across institutions, across subject areas in different parts of the world, whereas in India, that difference is marginal. We can move on.
Yeah, so the question that was asked was, do you
about
count
the ratios?
Yeah, so the ratio is based on FTE, full-time equivalent. So you define full-time equivalent as whatever the full-time person teaches. And so if its average is 5.5 courses a year for an MBA program, then if some part-timer is teaching just 2, then you can't take that part-timer as a full representative of faculty. You need 2.5 times that, or roughly whatever that ratio is, to calculate the faculty-student ratio. Okay, does that make sense? Yeah?
Thank you.
All right. So
I think we can move on,
Yeah.
and we'll get more questions, from all of you.
Yeah.
I have 2 questions. Can I just put it right now, if you don't mind?
No, can we take up a little later so that we can move on? There are 3 sessions. You will get lot of opportunity for questions. You can just jot them down and please.
Okay. Next slide, please. Okay. So another busy slide, but these are some general principles of faculty development. So now I'm moving to the question of where earlier I was looking at sort of the overall numbers. Now the topic I would like to deal with is that when you have faculty members, how do you upgrade them? How do you retain them? For some of those issues are to do with governance, which I'll take up in the next presentation. But here it's more that you have somebody that you're training or who has joined you, and you recognize that for the first 5 years or so, that person is not going to be a polished teacher or a polished researcher. Probably less chance of being a polished teacher than a polished researcher, because researchers very often get their ideas early in their careers. So whereas teaching is like wine, it improves with age. So it's important that the faculty member be properly trained, and that trained in many things, in technology usage, for example, in pedagogy. How do you take the knowledge that is in your head and that you read and then convert it into a course to deliver? How do you think through the process of lesson planning? So I'm going to spend a fair bit of time on these issues coming up, but my first slide is very general, and here I point out in the first bullet, each faculty member should annually develop his or her own customized faculty development plan based on the strategic initiatives. The FTP, faculty development plan should be a 3-year plan and should specify benchmarks to be met. The FDP should be finalized in consultation with the faculty member's immediate supervisor, who may be the head of department or maybe someone in the same field. You know, how you recruit people is actually quite important. Many institutions just say that, okay, I have a need for someone to teach banking courses or, you know, robotics or whatever, and they look for somebody in that field. The good institutions don't take that approach, at least in the United States. What they do is they say, we can always get someone to teach robotics, you know, that's not difficult, or to teach banking, but let's get the right person and let's look at who's out there. So they will systematically and with a lot of effort survey the whole country, indeed the whole world, to see who are the good people in that field. They will identify the top 10 or 15. Then they will conduct a series of assessments and so on to decide which one do they want. They'll narrow down on 1 or 2. And then they'll contact them and say, look, we'd really like you to come here and teach and be here for a long time. Of course, these are not for brand new people, but it may even apply to new. And then they just wait. And they'll make do with part-timers or temps and so on till they get that person. I know of one case where they waited 7 years to get the person that they wanted. But the idea was, once you get that person, he or she is going to be with you for life, you know, and that's what makes a great institution. So the first point that I put over here brings out that faculty development planning should be a long-term exercise. It should not be quarter by quarter or annual exercise. It has to be a 3-year plan, and later on I'll be glad to, I haven't shown it here, but to share what that document framework looks like. You know, and when I say based on strategic initiatives means what is it that you have asked that faculty member to accomplish over the next 3 years? Strategically, what contributions in teaching, in academic service, in curriculum development, in research? I know some of this will sound really arcane and esoteric because there's so much focus on just getting people and the shortage of faculty. But if you want to be a good institution, start thinking in this way. Secondly, the second point is that the FTP has to be written by that faculty member himself. It is not a standard document to be written by the department and saying, hey, do you agree to this? It has to be written by the faculty member, and it should be his assessment of what he can contribute to the institution. Now, finalizing it, of course, requires a supervisor who will sit with that faculty and say, you know, our departmental priorities are slightly different. Do you mind adjusting here and there? Sure, that discussion will go on and should go on. But end of the day, it will still be primarily the faculty member's document. This is really, really important because it's something I think that we really need to internalize in the Indian context. Otherwise, we won't get that institutional commitment, and you'll continue to see the high churning rate of faculty that you're seeing today. You know, now of course faculty churn has come down because the markets have declined a bit, but the moment things improve, they'll be on their way. Okay, second point is, of course it's a long-term document, but it needs to be reviewed quarterly and annually with the immediate supervisor. The annual review should take place in the final term of the academic year, and that leads to the preparation of a rolling 3-year plan. So every time you complete your annual review, the faculty member who has been reviewed is required to prepare a new 3-year plan which will look a further 3 years ahead. So he'll revise the remaining 2 years of his existing plan and will add 1 more year to that plan. Okay, and third, the quarterly review will cover teaching evaluations and planning for subsequent quarters' teaching requirements and allotments. So that is standard that already is happening in India, and I think that's a fairly straightforward process. The only point I'd like to make is teaching evaluations tend to be, even in good institutions like the IIMs and IITs, tend to be underplayed. There is this feeling that the students, for whatever reason, may not give accurate assessments. Either they are biased against a faculty member or whatever. Maybe, and this is not unique to India, it is there in every institution in the world, but what has been found is that on average the student is not biased. So never take one assessment of one class or even one whole class's assessment as being definitive, and that's why you need a 3-year plan. Over the 3 years, you can be sure that the quality of assessment coming out will be accurate from the students. Secondly, institutions are encouraged to set up anonymous websites. In other words, the institute sets it up. So Stanford, for example, has a website where students can anonymously post their views on a course, which is quite separate. And so the advantage of that is, one is it can be useful. Secondly, any student who has any gripe about a faculty member will first post it there, then he won't put it in the evaluation. So that's one part. Second point I want to make is that evaluation should be both by students and by peer, especially for newer faculty members. It must be the case that one faculty member attends in the first year every single course at least one lecture, and goes through that, sits through the whole lecture and takes detailed notes. And now technology is very cheap, so you should also have that faculty member accompanied by a videographer who will use the video camera to photograph the teacher from an expert's point of view, and then go through a thorough assessment of how that can be changed to help his teaching style. For example, when I started teaching, I was young, 29 years old, just finished my PhD. I would wear jeans, I would sit on the table, cross my legs and teach. And that time there was no videograph or anything, but there was a peer review. And they said, no, this is fine, but not all students can see you from where you're sitting like a Buddha, on this table. So just get around and walk a bit and make yourself close to the student and hear them out a bit. There'll be shy students who, if you sit like this far away, will not interact with you. The other thing is, how do you carry your voice? Those simple things like that. It's amazing the difference they make in terms of effectiveness of teaching. For example, you're excited about a point, you're turning to show it on the PowerPoint, and then there goes your voice, and nobody can hear you. So simple things like that have a big effect, but you only know that if you have a friendly environment where there's no threat to you. Somebody sitting there patiently taking notes, gives you a good feedback at the end. There's an expert with the videographer who then you sit through the video session with this expert, and he says, look, you did this, maybe you should try it like this. And he'll come back. He'll say, okay, I'll come back. You tell me when to come back, when you think you've got things ironed out. And you say, all right, come, when you're ready, you let that person know. They come back and they do one more video session, and they'll keep doing this as long as you need. All schools, they have huge technology centers for learning that make these things very economical and very important. Okay, so now last point is the annual review will cover accomplishments against the faculty development plan agreed to in the earlier year, updating of the rolling 3-year development plan, and specification of benchmarks for the coming year. Okay. Now, what the institution must commit to the faculty member is the following. So these, so far, in the previous slide, I looked at what the faculty member is committing to the institution and agreed to by the institution. But the institution also must make credible commitments to the faculty member. The first is the workload and balance between components. Components means between teaching, between curriculum development and other aspects of academic service, between research expectations and so on. It just does not make sense to ask a new faculty member to, when he is fresh with his research ideas, to spend too much time teaching. And so in most good institutions in the United States will give the easiest courses to the youngest faculty members, because they recognize that his research is how they will get their name. Where pretty much the opposite is observed, as I've seen in India. That the young people are, they say, oh, maybe they won't last out, let's give them the heavy duty work. Actually, that's at a time when they are the worst teachers. And it's really bad for the institution to expose the students to that quality of teaching. The next thing is a commitment to collegial work. That is, collegial work means that, you'll this peer review example I gave you, developing curriculum, and nowadays you have all the tools. When I come to technology development, I want to talk about that it's possible now to create resource repositories so that a new faculty member can go to that resource repository and just pick off many syllabuses to review, pick elements in a very friendly way, editable way, and create a course outline. And then submit it for review to his senior saying, how does this look? And these are my additions for references, for new things to teach. For example, how often do you personally revise your teaching syllabus? Now, of course, in the United States, there are those who haven't changed their syllabus forever. But the general expectation is that in social sciences, which is where I teach, management, economics, and so on, that you will revise 40% of your syllabus every year. 40. Okay, that's quite large. It requires a lot of effort to do that. And the reason is in these things you have to stay relevant. Of course, it's different for different fields. If you're teaching history, it's different, you'll probably revise less. You also have to be sensitive in revising your syllabus to what sort of class you have. So you have to think through and assess that for these kinds of students, I will teach in this way. So that collegiality and that record, the anecdotal records of what the institution is like, the memory of the institution, what particular students are like, all these things can be both technology enabled and also be made much more collegial. Third is funding. What I mean by funding is that particularly for fresh faculty member, they need support in terms of going to conferences and so on. I think Indian institutions actually are doing quite a good job in that respect. But in one respect, they don't do a very good job, and that is, which is quite costly, is making sure that every faculty member, no matter how junior, has enough research assistance. See, nowadays, particularly in fields in the life sciences and engineering and natural sciences, your typical project will require 7 to 8 people working on it, with lots of lab facilities and so on. Now, a fresh faculty member would not typically be able to raise the funding on his own in the first few years to be able to afford that. So it's very important that the institution make those sorts of commitments. Say, okay, you come, I'll make sure you have at least 2 lab assistants, of which one will be a doctoral student. Of course, many institutions in India do not have doctoral programs, so you have to work around, but I'm saying that's what will retain your faculty and make them effective from the funding point of view. And finally, the expectations from faculty at different levels. And what I mean by this is that, as you go up the faculty ladder from assistant to associate to full, the expectations on you will differ. The more senior you are, the expectations of academic service are going to be higher, and the expectations of research are going to be higher. So all these things have to be clearly specified to the faculty member at each level that they operate. Okay, and one thing I want to point out that in the United States, it's very common for the head of department to not be a full professor. Okay, whereas unlike here, where it is almost viewed as a hierarchy, so that you graduate to being head of department when you're a full professor, that's not the case in the United States. There the idea is that there's a lot of administrative work in being head of department, and full professors from whom you expect leadership of young faculty, particularly in research and how to teach, should spend their time on that. So typically it's a senior associate professor, someone who's not yet promoted to full professor, who will be the head of department. And that's very interesting because it breaks the hierarchy concept thinking, which is really important to achieve in India, where the hierarchical thinking is often quite entrenched. Okay, next slide please. Here, I hope you enjoyed this slide. I certainly enjoyed making it. So what you see is, and this I've shown Pawan earlier, so even though he's not here, he knows about it. So in terms of how do you divide your time as a faculty member? So that black line, so let me go through the columns. So basically the tasks of a faculty member are administration, strategic planning, development, which means largely fundraising, teaching and research. So the black line on the first row, director, then below that HOD in the first column, below that professor, associate professor, below that faculty. No, sorry, there's a mistake there. I shouldn't have written faculty. Assume that's not there. So associate professor, professor, then below that assistant professor, and then UG. Okay, undergraduate teaching. Okay, sort of below that. So now the black line tells you, so hold off on that last line, we don't need to discuss that, we'll just go up to the assistant professor. So the black line, director 85, 5, 10, negligible, negligible, tells you, based on the survey I did, which is coming up in our book, what is in Indian institutions the current breakup of time. So the director of an institution typically spends 85% on admin work, 5% on strategic planning, 10% on development. HOD spends 10% on admin, 4% on development, 79% on teaching, 5% on research. This is all the black lines. Associate professor spends 10% on admin, no strategic planning, 10% on development, 70% on teaching, 10% on research. Okay, by the way, development includes, includes not just fundraising, but also things like, service to the institution. Assistant professor is 10, negligible, 10, 70, 10. Now in red you're seeing the American numbers. So what you're seeing is that in America, the director of the institution would typically spend much less time on admin, 25%, much more on strategic planning, 25%, much more on development, especially fundraising, 40%, and teaching research would be 5% each. HOD would be 30 on admin, negligible on strategic planning, 30% on development, 30% on teaching, and 10% on research. Associate professor, full professor would be 10 on admin, negligible on strategic planning, 10 on development, and 40-40 teaching research. And an assistant professor, and here you see what I was saying earlier, very minimal admin or development load. Teaching is also much less than research, 30-50. Okay, so this is something I would offer to you and say that look at this and see if you can bring your institutions to think through this and say, well, what maybe the red one has some basis to it. Okay, so that's on that slide. Now what I have is next slide, please. So it's already 11. What do you want me to?
No, you can continue. I think this is important.
Okay.
How long do you have presentation?
I can probably take about another 15 minutes to finish this one.
Can you summarize it? We, in any case, are going to circulate this presentation. And with your permission, we will also circulate your email ID to these
please.
people.
Absolutely.
So in case, based on, I think it might be a good idea to just summarize the points that you are making.
Okay.
And then, because it's the absorptive capacity of our people, particularly remote people, we have to understand that. So too heavy a presentation will also not be very helpful.
Okay.
So let them go through it. You just give them a background of what the next few slides are saying, so that they can see it at their own point.
Okay, so maybe what I'll do, Pawan, is, if it's okay with you, is that I'm actually getting into an area where technology plays a role.
So you can take it up in the technology.
I can cover it there. So, so maybe I can stop now, and we can have some discussion for 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And then we can move on to the next session. Okay.
I think that is a good idea. Which institution had a question? When Roorkee. IIT Roorkee had a question. I think over to you. And
My question. Hello.
Yes, please. Yeah.
My question essentially.
No, actually we can't see you. Your camera is not facing you.
Okay, I think I'll ask the people here to do that. Meanwhile, I'll still speak so that you can hear the words.
And you can move to.
You can move to.
Sir, can I interact? Can I ask a question?
IIT Roorkee is here, so we'll take you up after that, you know.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. Now we can see. Yes,
I'll put the question across. Mainly my point was that in the perspective of you're talking about the MBA programs, as my small understanding goes, in contrast to US, there are a couple of European countries who are converging on to the 1-year MBA rather than having a 2-year MBA program. And I have noticed that in many cases now, amongst the people who are having opinion about the evaluation of MBA programs, perhaps there is a feeling that 1-year MBA program may be sufficient. I'm not too sure about it, but which way to go and perhaps what can be analyzed in this perspective. That is point number one. Point number two is that with my interaction across several institutes in many parts of the world, I found that the tenure track professors at the senior level, as now you have also shown the red percentages in red, really devote a long time, really devote a lot of time to bring in the sponsorships. And there, the time spent on the teaching is really very much less. And in contrast to that, the time in teaching in the Indian institutes, especially in the IITs, is really pretty much. That is one of the observations which I have. Certainly, the other things what you have said, that the people who are joining at the assistant professor level, they have the more loads. That's perfectly all right. But certainly, it goes much lesser as you go up, as I have seen outside. So these are the 2 points which I wish to make.
Okay. So in response, I noted your second point. It's more a comment. The first point, you wanted some opinion on whether 1-year MBA is preferred to a 2-year MBA, and ISB, I think, is a 1-year MBA, no? And they are very highly ranked. My view is, it's certainly to some extent driven by the economics of it. Even in the United States now, there's a lot of interest in moving from a 4-year undergraduate degree program to a 3-year undergraduate degree program. And many colleges, I believe when I last read the numbers, something like 50 or 60 colleges have started a 3-year degree program on the grounds that the students need to get into the workforce earlier in these difficult times. There is a compromise, if you look at 2-year MBA versus 1-year MBA, there's no maturing process that can compare. I mean, you can squeeze everything in. If you're already skilled and you've got a lot of work experience, maybe you can take it in a year. And that's why you'll see most of the 1-year MBA programs tend to take older students. But if you're taking someone who's relatively young and for whom you're trying to also develop an interest in a research perspective, so that when they come out of the workplace of their MBA, they may also think of doing a PhD. I think for that the 2-year MBA is required. But that's just my opinion. I haven't seen any firm studies for comparing the two. Should we go to the next question?
Yeah, we can go to maybe Shivaji University.
Yes, the lady with her hand up here.
Yeah.
Shivaji University. Yeah.
Yes, sir. Sir, at the outset, I think I should really congratulate sir for having made certain very, very important, minute and realistic observation relating to the education system in India. Basically, the question that he has raised is relating to regarding recruitment of the right person at the right place. That is very important, sir. The next thing which I want to point out is regarding the curriculum. There is a vast difference between the curriculum in US and India relating to the quality of teaching, as well as the content of the curriculum is also very important, which needs to be career-based, because since the youth is looking forward to career-based courses, that is the difference I feel, which is very prominent when we are comparing United States of America and India. Another question is relating to the minimum requirement that we are having in India, which emphasizing on NetSet and PhD, but it doesn't emphasize on the research point of view. Thank you, sir. You want to ask?
There's one thing.
Another question that is...
One more. He began with the scale discussion. What is the ideal optimum scale for an undergraduate college? And the United States, what's happened, most of the undergraduate colleges are multidisciplinary, multi-faculty. Whereas in India, most of the undergraduate colleges, either they are science colleges or arts and commerce colleges. Now, if you visualize such a ideal basic scale, then the cost will come into importance. And if you look at the funding pattern in India, especially in regional universities, the fund availability has a lot of limitations. And therefore, I think the scale that is in the United States becomes less applicable for a country like India. Thank you.
I think, on the issue of scale, or particularly on the presentation as such, what is being, said by Rafiq may not really be applicable to Indian situation. But I think the principles are very important. The principles underlying them are important, and whatever is relevant, I think the purpose of these discussions, these kind of events, is basically to let the academia in our institutions know that what's happening around the world, and to enable them to learn what is relevant in their own context. So obviously, everything that he said may not be relevant to India, and therefore we have to understand that distinction. Would you like to make a comment on this? And after this, we will move on to the next session, and I'll invite, Dr. Sindhu Shri Khullar, who is the Secretary Planning Commission. She wanted to join this session herself to interact with you, to understand what we are trying to do in the HRD division in the Planning Commission. So you can respond to it, and meanwhile I'll invite her.
Okay. So there were three questions here. One is, the content of the education is more career-based in India, right? Is that was the point, I think, made by expectation of the students?
It's not career-based, especially in social sciences and humanities. It is not career-based. While it is so in United States.
Yes. Yeah, that's okay. I was going to respond that actually in the United States it is very career-based. So that's the point you were making. Yes, I agree with you. I haven't studied the social science curriculum here, although I studied in Delhi University undergraduate many years ago. But I'll give you my own example. When I did my MBA from IIM Calcutta, this was in the early 70s, and there I found that then I go off to Northwestern University to do my PhD in finance. Now I have my BA from one of the good institutions in India, St. Stephen's College with a first division, and MBA from IIM Cal with a major in finance and economics. The very first class I took at Northwestern University, the professor came in and said, there are lots of international students here. I have no idea what your capacity is. Here's a test. All of you will take this exam, and that will tell me, benchmark me, because this is what you are supposed to know as of now, as of entering my class. This is your starting base. I failed the test. I got 29 out of 100. I still remember, I was thoroughly ashamed. I said, my God, what has my education been worth so far, And then, of course, you had to pull yourself up and work very, very hard. So I think there is definitely a problem in the social sciences. I'm sure there's been a lot of catching up since I graduated nearly 40 years ago. But I understand your point. I think some sort of study of this is something, ma'am, that I really recommend somebody do, to bring out how career-based is educational science, political science, economics, and other social sciences. You had a question on research. I didn't quite get that question. Can you repeat that?
I wanted to just point out towards the fact that our recruitment process demands, while recruiting a teacher, we require the candidate to be a net set or a PhD. We are not concentrating upon the research point of view or regarding the caliber of the candidate while recruiting.
Sorry,
Yeah, please
Dr.
continue. Continue.
Dr.
Let him
Kuller
have-
just came in, so I'll just finish off.
Yeah, please, no, please continue, and then we'll move on from there.
Okay, so that was a comment, ma'am, right? So, okay, noted. And that's something I think you should bring up to Dr. Agarwal, and he can maybe try and do something about it. The third question from the gentleman there was about the scale. And as Pawan pointed out that, I gave you American data, 5,000 students as the average 500 faculty member and so on. And that enables a multidisciplinary offerings and allows students to take subjects across disciplines. Contrary to what Pawan is saying, my view actually is that this is the model that one should look at. And actually, the 5-year plan document does say that there's a need to consolidate and create large institutions. And I've seen a UGC document which actually mentions numbers of thousands, not 5,000. I think it says 2,000 is the minimum size. So obviously, you have to customize it to the context, the Indian context, and then you can come up. But I think, even I've seen at IIT, for example, thankfully I'm an academic, so I don't really care which institutions I criticize. But, I just told them that I came out of St. Stephen's College, went to IIM Calcutta, and then the professor at my PhD program gave us a test to assess where we were. A large class, about 30 students or so, PhD students, and I got 29 out of 100, and I failed the test. And I said that really shook me up completely, that this was the state of my knowledge, coming in. But the point I want to make is that, you have to look at making sure you have good faculty in the other disciplines. You cannot use part-timers to teach critical thinking in an MBA course. And that's only possible if you have other disciplines where that critical thinking faculty member can interact with other people in his department. Otherwise, he's not going to be committed to your institution and do a good job. I was talking about IIT Madras. I had gone there for my research purposes, and I found that they have tried very hard to bring in multidisciplinary approaches for the students' program, but the problem is they have taken very small faculty numbers in the humanities. And those people are not at all happy being there because they are too few. They would rather be in a lower tier institution where there are many like them where they can interact. So that's where that faculty development plan that I discussed earlier, I think has to be considered. So let me wrap up with that. Yeah?
Thank you, Rafiq. As I mentioned to all of you, we are pleased to welcome Dr. Sindhu Shri Khuller, who is the Secretary Planning Commission, and in fact she has been encouraging all of us in the Planning Commission to do innovative things like this. In fact, she was surprised that this is fourth in the series of events that we are having here, and she wanted more people to join from the Planning Commission in these kind of events. Before we go into the next session by Rafiq, which is on institutional governance. Ma'am, the background, and I think for all of us, the background of these exercises essentially that change in higher education system will happen at the institutional level, at the university and college level. It will not happen in the Planning Commission or in Shastri Bhavan or in UGC. Unless we change the way institutions of higher education function internally, that all the reform measures will be ineffective. And this series of programs that we are organizing is basically to nudge our institutions to learn what is happening globally, as far as institutional management is concerned. And I think in that context, this session is very important. Issues of institutional governance. And even the previous session that we heard, faculty development and planning, I'm sure that there were a few learnings that happened. The format that we normally have is, of course, the kind of interaction that is possible on a face-to-face meeting like this is not possible through a remote provision, but we try to have as much interaction as possible. Second is that we will send his presentation to the participants, and he has kindly agreed to give his email as well, So in case people have questions, they can always, be in touch with him after the session. And we want to systematize it a little more so that we can do it with little effort in future and also get more value from it. Before I request Rafiq to start his session on issues in institutional governance, would you like to say something?
Thank you very much, Pawan. In fact, I'm extremely happy to be part of this group today. It also gives me an opportunity to speak for the Planning Commission that in the 12th plan, one of the major issues that have come to the forefront in all the sectors across the board is the issues relating to weaknesses in implementation and governance. In particular, when we disaggregated it sector-wise, we found that one of the areas which can immediately benefit from some greater and deeper understanding of the weaknesses and challenges in governance is the higher education sector. Firstly, because there is now a consensus across the sector, particularly in the higher education sector, that throwing money is not the answer. Throwing money is one part of it, and we've got so accustomed in our development efforts to keep thinking that if only we had more money, we would become the best or the greatest in our fields, brightest in our fields. The reason I say this is because the ability to introspect and the ability to understand what stands in the way of better quality, better governance, lies within the institutions in the higher education sector. I cannot say that in other sectors, because in the other sectors, the stakeholders very often are not able to articulate what is standing in the way of their programs being improved or the programs of government, non-government, others, reaching them better, serving them better. But in the case of this sector, we find that the expectations are higher because in many ways this is going to lead all other sectors in the next 10 or 20 years. Second, the other learning that we have got, I think you've already mentioned that, is the issue of quality. Nowhere is it more stark or facing us, staring us in the face as in the higher education sector. Rafiq was extremely candid as I entered about where we stand, despite all our credentials, despite all our individual brilliance that we may exhibit in any university system. Across the board, our institutions are unable to measure up to some standards, some benchmarks, whether nationally or internationally. That's another reason why I think we need to look inwards. As far as we are concerned in the Planning Commission, we would welcome any kind of participation feedback which will come out as an outcome or a learning. Otherwise, even in themselves, they are an end in themselves. So through the National Knowledge Network, I am happy that we have been able to already organize 3 such interactions. One in October on institutional transformation at the National University of Singapore. The second by Professor Peter Alpach on institutional transformation towards world-class universities in India. This is a theme I think we are carrying forward. And then a third one by Judith Wolfson on the role of interdisciplinarity in driving innovation, creating value and addressing global issues. We've already held this talk today. The talks today is the 4th in the series, and I'm informed that in March we will be hosting another such talk through the National Knowledge Network. This is our effort in drilling down the objectives in the 12th five-year plan sector by sector, and as I said, the expectations from all of you is very high because the capacities and the capabilities for driving change is much higher in thinking persons with very high degrees of learning in themselves. So with this, I will stop here and request Rafiq to take us forward in this.
Thank you, Dr. Khullar. It's an honor to have you here with us. And as I launch into the second part of this presentation, the topic shifts from faculty development planning to governance. The reason why, when discussing with Pawan as to which topics would be appropriate, be centered on this one as being quite important, is that there is a feeling within policymakers and university administrators that the governance structure needs to be looked at very closely. So, if you go back to all the reports that have been written, I'm thinking of the Gyanam Committee report of 1990, I think it was. There was the 1969 report, I forget whose it was. But I first read this stress on governance as far back, I think, in that 69 report. So for at least 40 years now or more, the system has been concerned that the governance needs to be right. In all the documents, broadly the stress is on the upper level of governance. That is, it says that in designing a university which governs so many colleges within it, how should that university structure be organized so that the colleges themselves are given proper autonomy and can run properly. My presentation is different. It looks within the institution, that is the college or the institution, if it's a autonomous university and so on. It looks within the teaching institution and asks how should that institution be organized to be effective. And in some ways it clearly ties up with my earlier presentation on faculty development, because most of the things that I presented there require a certain overarching governance structure that makes these things possible, and I hope that comes out clearly in the presentation. So let's go to the next slide, please. So the first point I'd like to make, which I'll sort of carry with me as I go through this presentation, is that broadly speaking, in running a teaching institution, and I may use the word university, college, teaching institution interchangeably in this from now on. What I mean is the institution that recruits teachers and students and provides the place for them for the interaction and instruction to take place. So broadly speaking, there are two management models under which we find governance takes place within the institution. One is what is called the faculty-driven model, and the second is what is called the management-driven model. So in the faculty model, what you see is that all positions from the vice-dean upwards, and vice-dean is a term that's used here, but there may be other equivalents in other institutions, are occupied by senior faculty. Remember in my earlier presentation, I pointed out that in the United States, most heads of department positions are occupied by senior middle faculty, that is, not full professors but associate professors. And the reason for that is that it is too much work, so that the full professors are expected to spend their time guiding the young people and undertaking research and teaching the core courses, so they don't have too much time for administration. Whereas here it's hierarchical, so normally you get promoted to being HOD. Whereas there, when somebody becomes HOD, everybody sends him a message of condolences. and the first thing he wants to do is get out of that position as quickly as possible so he can get back to his core competency, really, which is not administration. But you have to do it as service. But when you come to the vice dean onwards, you find senior faculty occupying the position. Decision making, and I'll show you some charts on this, is decentralized as far as possible to departments. So even you will find things like fees to charge to an extent can be decentralized at departments, and I'll come to that. There's a limited focus on cost control above the department level. In other words, the department is very concerned about its costs, so it makes decisions on students to be recruited. Of course, the tuition fees are set in consultation with the university, with the whole institution. But in terms of how that budget is allocated and costs are controlled, is left to the department. So, for example, in the department where I used to teach in the United States, in Stanford University, we had a departmental budget, and the head of department negotiated that with the university, and said that, okay, for this year your budget is so much, it represents an increase of say 3% or 5%, or in the bad year in 2007, we had to do an 8% cutback in our budget. Now mind you, this is one of the wealthiest universities in the world, had to do an 8% cutback in their budget. Now how that is accomplished is left to the departments. So for example, at the same time as the business school was cutting a lot of administrative staff and some junior hires who had been around for 3-4 years, whom they thought would not get tenure. So they just axed about 56 people from their department, from the whole business school. My department made everyone take an 8% salary cut. And they cut all events, everything, every single activity was cut by 8%. And so you saw within the same university two completely different approaches. And they each felt that this is what's appropriate for our long-term growth, and we can discuss what this means. But that brings out the point that there is limited focus on cost control above the department. Everything happens within the department. And finally, performance is measured at the level of departments. So whether it's student performance or faculty performance for promotion, that happens within the department. Certainly the Dean of Research, the head of the institution has to ratify it, but that is more or less viewed as a rubber stamp. As you go beyond the department, the institution matters less and the department is everything. I think when I was here in November, I pointed out that at one speech that the president of Stanford University gave, and he said, I get all these delegations from different countries, particularly China and India, asking me to sign a collaborative agreement between their institutions and Stanford. And he said, my response is always that I have no power to do that. If I sign it, it has no sanctity for the institution. Even if the department signs it, has no sanctity for the faculty member. Everything is determined at the level of the department and below. And he actually used an analogy. He said, I view myself as the caretaker of a graveyard. He said, my job is to make sure that the graveyard looks pretty. Now, it's kind of a strange analogy to think of a university as a graveyard, but his sense, he said, all these tombstones are the departments. And I have no visibility to what's going on underneath the tombstone. I'm not supposed to know, and I only get overall reports, and my job is to mow the lawn and make sure it looks pretty. And mind you, this is a person who is a very accomplished academic himself. His textbook, Hennessy's textbook on very large-scale design, I'm sure some of you would be aware, is still being taught in the United States, and this was his considered view. So that's a faculty-driven institution. Now, there are also a very large number, and in many countries, a majority of institutions are what are called management-driven. All positions except for head of department are open to anyone, can be recruited from inside or outside the academia. There's an emphasis on professional managers occupying positions such as deans of business affairs and development. So the thinking here is that these are professional activities that require specialized expertise. So let's get professionals. The department is viewed as a cost center. So think of the difference when I say cost control and cost center. I gave you an example of how cost control works. And cost center is much more obvious that each department, they have a budget, this is what they cost. There'll be some sort of balancing between them, and they will say, okay, cut down on your faculty members or increase your student recruitment. Try and focus on those departments which are more revenue generating or more in demand. So expand the IT department or reduce it when times are bad. There's greater academic surveillance. This means that performance is much more benchmarked across the institution. So the trustee or the chief executive of an institution or the director may look very closely at how each faculty member is performing relative to institutional benchmarks, whereas in the faculty-driven, it would be more faculty making these decisions at the department level. And finally, there's an emphasis on the student as a client. the student is viewed as a consumer of educational services, and efforts are made to satisfy that interest. And I've seen myself in the interviews I've done at institutions here and interacted with the students, how powerful the students are. In terms of saying, you know, I don't like this teacher, I don't like this course, I want this sort of program to suit my interests. And at the IIMs, it's almost taken to an extreme where in some cases even the course catalogue is created after determining student interest. I'm not saying anything wrong with that. In many ways, to us, it seemed natural that students should be viewed as a client or a consumer. It's a different model. I mean, the way that I came from, the student was viewed as someone who was shaped. Certainly you looked, and the student made his own decisions about where to be shaped. But having made that decision about where to be shaped, having come to, say, a Stanford University or wherever, then it was left to the institution to shape him. Of course, there's plenty of flexibility to allow him all sorts of course corrections and so on, but it would be rarely the case that the department would say that we will determine our course catalogue based on student interests. So next slide, please. Now the reasons for managerialism are good ones, and obviously I think in India most of which is driven by the managerial model. These would be familiar to you. The technical arguments are that efficiency requires using specialized management instruments, for instance strategic planning and financial control, that can only be used by professionals trained for that job. You can't expect an ancient language teacher, Sanskrit teacher necessarily to be efficient at financial planning. That's the thinking anyway. The political argument is that the institution needs to engage efficiently with the market, and the only way it can do that and compete is if you centralize power and have strong leadership at the top. So there's a legitimization of centralized power and strong leadership that is necessary for institutions to efficiently engage with the market. And third is modern management practices, that there's a hierarchy. You know, corporation is a hierarchy. There's the people at the top who must order and people below who will follow. And it's not a marketplace where you can put prices on orders and you can move around. It's a hierarchy. So like that, the institution can be viewed as a hierarchy from the trustees to the basic academic units that need support from specialized management units, information officers, planning officers, technology licensing officers, quality officers, etc., in order to achieve institutional goals. So that's the managerial model. Next slide, please. So which is better? A corporation is organized as a hierarchy. A span of control is defined efficiently as of 6 to 8 persons whose knowledge substantially overlaps with and is synthesized by the person above. So the whole reason for the existence of a corporation is that people have overlapping knowledge, but not exactly the same knowledge. So you bring people together in groups of ideally 6 to 8 persons, let them synthesize their knowledge. What is created then is something better than each person's knowledge, and then that then flows up and benefits the organization. So that's the management theory behind a corporation. A university or a college consists of faculty whose knowledge is largely unique and whose capacity to synthesize is comprehensive. So that a faculty member who is highly trained is believed to have the ability to synthesize within the person. So that is enabled by his superior training, his PhD or her PhD and so on. And so the argument is made that in a by faculty driven institutions, that a corporate type hierarchy will therefore not work, and that the role of the head of department should be largely administrative rather than content driven, and academic work should be largely individually driven. So just as in these things we have taken away from students their ability to largely shape themselves and given that entrust to the institution, that trust is now captured in the faculty driven model by individual faculty members. So unlike in the managerial model where that trust is then held by the people at the top and they make the decision on how to shape the student, in the faculty driven model it's a different approach, and that is responsibility is taken by individual faculty. So let me stop here, right, Pawan? It's about 11:40.
Yeah.
Take some questions and then continue.
How long is the presentation?
I prepared too many slides, so I'll just have another 16 out of my 20
Okay.
slides to go. So we can take 5 minutes of questions. And
So I think we can take questions from NIT Trichy, which has not been there on NIT Trichy. Any comments?
Yeah. No, the question is on the very. Are you able to hear me?
Yes.
We can hear you, but we cannot see you. So maybe camera is not on your side, you know.
I see. That's fine.
Other side.
Other side, yes.
Yeah. A little more. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Now we are here.
Yeah.
We can see you now.
So in fact, yes. In fact, NIT Trichy has been attending all the programs, and Director NIT Trichy has been extremely enthusiastic. We are grateful to you, Professor Sadhurajan. Yeah, please.
Thank you, Dr. Agarwal. The question is on the faculty planning, very first one. We have, we just would like to have an idea from you. We have two options. Option one is, we are an engineering institution. Option one is on the core areas, 70%. The core area means for us 50% the core subject and 20% electives in the subject, and remaining 30% is global electives from different departments. We have alternative 2 with us, with the Ministry of Human Resource Development's intervention, 50% on core subject and 20% on industry-oriented courses and 30% on global electives. With the type of comparison you are making between the two countries, more or less we are fitting into the model what you have fixed up, which according to you will be a better approach in these two alternatives?
yeah, it's really hard for me to pick one because I have to see the content. I mean, just what you pointed out, the only difference is that the 20% electives in Model 1 is replaced by industry-oriented courses, which are not electives.
It will be taught by the industry.
Oh, it will be taught by industry. Oh, no, I have a lot of concerns about that.
Okay.
You're saying 20% of the contact hours would be courses fully taught by industry people?
Yeah.
No, I would definitely be, just prima facie, totally against that. Okay, my experience is quite extensive because I've taught in MBA programs around in many institutions and also in India. And I find that getting people from industry brings in a certain kind of knowledge, but not any sense of how to teach. And pedagogy is critical at the undergraduate level. And if I have time, I will go through instructional design. It was part of the first presentation, but we ran out of time. But in that you will see how important it is to link program objectives to course competencies, to learning outcomes, instruction strategies and assessment. There's no way you can do it by bringing an industry person in. Okay, you have to have someone who's very well oriented. Now you may say, okay, my comparison is with someone who's pretty useless because I bring someone in as a part-timer to teach and he's not trained. Then maybe you're right. But if you want, at the NIT level, you shouldn't be thinking that way. So that's my gut reaction.
But I think I have a supplementary here. All the time we have been saying that we have to engage with industry, even in teaching. And I think, NIT Trichy is taking a step forward in engaging industry as part-time faculty. Yes. So, is it something that we should not even look at? Or if we look at this option, then how do we go about it? Your point is well taken that pedagogical deficiencies are there, there.
So that's why I carefully asked, was it a course fully taken by an industry person or not? No, I think it's very good to get industry people to give lectures.
Yeah.
Tie them into a very tight schedule and say that you will cover this topic, these are your learning objectives from this course. They tell me what your instruction strategy is, and these are the assessments against which what you teach will be measured. And have them design it properly for you. That's fine. Then you come in and have them teach that 1 or 2 lectures in a course. I would not go beyond 15% maximum industry participation in a single course. But nowhere near a full course taught by an industry person. So I think that's the way to do it.
Okay. I think...
Comment, sir. I am from IIT Patna.
Yes, please.
My observation is that nowadays it is demand of the day that managerial model should be preferred. And as per the Kakotkar committee report's recommendation, it is also desirable. But my question is that eligibility criteria regarding selection of officers in IIT as well as the university as an educational administrator, it is old. My recommendation is it should be changed so that the industry professionals who can enhance the productivity of the institution, they can be selected. And for that, the eligibility criteria should be changed. Even then nowadays, in university model, UGC model, it is 55% in master degree. So I think it's very easy to get 55% master degree and get eligible for that officer level selection. So that should be changed, sir. This is my observation. Thank you.
What you said again, this is what you told earlier is against the argument is.
And my view is that it depends. If you have a managerial model, then you need to set these sorts of standards, And if you have a faculty-driven model, and you're an institution which should be able to set its own standards. I'm sure they're allowed to do that. Why does it have to be so formulaic, Are you obliged to follow the UGC recommendation?
No, IITs are not.
Yeah, that's what I thought. So you should look at
it. All RTI questions they are asking why you are making stringent criteria. So that's why we are compelled to follow either the MHRD or UGC norm.
Separate act, sir.
I think you have a point, and the whole purpose of these presentations is basically opening our minds to new ways the world is doing things, and to that extent I think there is a lot of learning that should take place, but RTI you have to handle it creatively, because as far as the legal position is concerned, no one binds you, either MHRD or UGC, to do things in a certain manner. IITs have a lot of autonomy, and I can tell on this platform that there are IITs which are doing a lot of innovative things, which even the top universities in the world are not doing. So I think the only issue is, yes, we have to learn from each other. I believe IIT Gandhinagar is doing a lot of interesting things. Even in the context of what you are mentioning. And you can find out how they are handling the RTIs in this respect. Yeah, we can move on.
Okay, let's continue.
You can go on to the next part of your presentation.
Yes. Okay, so let's put up the next slide, please. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, let's go to the next one, please. Yeah. So, in interest of time, I'll move on. There are a couple of slides now I'll cover and then sort of wrap up. The first part of this slide is material that I, to some extent, covered in the earlier presentation on faculty development. The teaching governance, how should it be organized? So, teaching requires research thinking. Why do we say that a teacher should have a PhD, ideally? And why, in one reason, I was against having a course fully taught by an industry person, is that you need hypotheses and reflections on process rather than mechanical explanations. When in researching for our book, we videotaped a circuit theory course. The same circuit theory course was videotaped pretty much across the world. This book is on the BRIC countries and the US. So we videotaped a circuit theory lecture being taught in engineering institutions in India, China, Russia, Brazil, and the US. one thing that came out in the Indian lectures was, many things came out in the videotape. We then had the videotapes evaluated by experts. One of the things that came out which might interest you, which is not the main point I want to make, is that in the Indian lectures, nobody raises a voice. So even whether I'm videotaping IIT lectures or middle tier university or lower tier university, none of the students raises a voice, So there's no interaction. It's all chalk and talk. Teachers hugging the classroom, the blackboard, and talking away. But the main point I want to make from the lecture is from these videotapes is that the good teachers were those who made sure that there were lots of case studies in their presentation. So in the Indian case, for example, I remember one lecture which struck me particularly, one that I taped in Bangalore, where the teacher is explaining how the 8088 chip is designed. So that design, and he's going through the pins on the chip and saying Intel designed, mind you, when 8088 came out, right, sometime in the 1980s, designed this pin for this purpose, these two pins were for later use. There's a purely mechanical explanation. That's what I mean when I wrote a mechanical explanation. The student is going to learn nothing from that. He, 5 years later also he will not even remember the lecture. I only remember it some years later because it was so odd. So what you want in teaching governance is that teachers should create their own pedagogy and curriculum, and the student review and peer review should drive the teacher's performance review. So this I covered earlier, but let me turn to research governance. That research requires time, so you cannot expect a fresh young professor to produce good research. Of course, he'll have very good ideas, so you want to give him that 2-3 year space. Before you came, I think I put up this chart where ideally the assistant professor teaches less than a senior professor, whereas actually we observe the opposite. Because their ideas are best when they graduate. By the time you're 35, 40, your ideas are not that great, and I'm almost 60, so my ideas are not that good. But with Pawan's help, they're not bad. But in the early days, research governance means setting goals, and you can set very specific goals: citation goals, publication goals, invention goals. When a review is done of a faculty member, you should say, well, where are you going to publish? Give me the impact factors of these. What sort of citations do you have? Where are they going? Give me the trends. Now, digitally, you can see everything, month by month after release, how your citations are going. And your performance must be based on that. And it has to be administered by the head of department. Okay, so I put this here. It sort of fits in with faculty development, but I put it here from a governance perspective because to bring out sort of the challenges with the managerialist model. That when you're a trustee and you're driving the director and the principal to look at cost management, resource provision, market responsiveness, market steering, these are things that are going to definitely make it very challenging to achieve. Sorry, go to the next slide, please. When you're looking at these sorts of issues, the first four that I mentioned, it's going to make it very difficult for you to undertake the sort of patient research review that you want to give to your faculty members. Okay, now let's move on a few slides to the, keep going on the slides, I'll tell you. Next one. Yeah, just stop there for a moment. I'm now going to give you sort of the broad Indian, this will be very familiar to you, but I want to bring out a governance point here. The organization structure of Indian higher education institutions, and I'll compare that with your typical, as was pointed out, this is largely the managerialist structure, and then I'll bring out what the faculty-driven structure, the more decentralized approach is. So it starts with the board of trustees, the principal, and then there are three, Dean of Academics, Business Affairs, and Development. Development means academic development and maybe fundraising. Okay, let's go to the next one. Then you have a Business Affairs where the Dean of Business Affairs looks after finance, admin, infrastructure, IT, HR, legal and compliance, and public safety. camps of going through this fairly quickly. Then you have the development department, which is, concerned with its issues largely to do with fundraising. In India, this is relatively undeveloped, but in any other country, particularly US, Western Europe, and so on, you'll see this fundraising is a very important category, and it's going to grow over here as well as alumni bases become large and they develop loyalty to their alumni. Okay, but the main one I want to show is the next one. Please go to the next one. So here you see the division of academic governance. So you have a dean of academics, and then there's an HOD. So there's a secretariat which includes some financial interlinkages with the dean for business affairs. Below that is the HOD. The HOD primarily looks after instruction. So below the HOD is instruction. Then you have vice dean of HRD and placement, who looks after all student recruitment, internships, and their placement. Then below dean academics is the research center. So, maybe a research center for particular activities, maybe for financial modeling or some engineering activity. And then you have the registrar's function, which is vice dean for academic support, and that covers things like admissions. Gosh, I'm having trouble reading this. Just a second. It covers admissions, financial aid, libraries, student housing and counseling, academic planning, calendars, sports and extracurricular activities, assessment and examinations, approvals and accreditation. So for example, there's one institution I studied recently which has about 8,000 students in India. That's an engineering college. Their timetabling takes a full department of 3 people 17 days before every term to prepare. Now, to me it looks sort of weird because I'm thinking of Stanford University where we have 20,000 students and the timetable is done in 3 days. And that's also, I think, because they're not digitized enough. But I realize the key difference is the level of decentralization. So just go on a few slides, please. I'll tell you when to stop. Next, keep going. Keep going. Keep going. Keep going. Yeah. When you look at decentralized governance, and now I want you to compare it with that earlier slide, you see now where the HOD was earlier looking after instruction, that might be easier for you. The HOD now also looks after admissions, advising, proctoring, department research centers, assessment and exams, approvals and accreditation, recruitment and placement, and finance. And I've explained some of these earlier. We can go into more detail if you want. Most of these activities are pushed off to the HOD from the registrar. So registrar's set is now financial aid, libraries, student housing, academic planning, and sports. Looking more like the ERP function of a corporation, the registrar's work, whereas the HOD's is much more the MIS function of an organization. The vice dean for research now has pedagogy, technology, compliance and licensing, and independent research centers. Now, these are the first 2 are activities that are not typically found in Indian institutions, and I believe that they are actually absolutely critical. See, in India we don't have a good enabling infrastructure or something like the Bayh-Dole Act, which is there in the US and its equivalent in Europe, where any invention becomes the property of the institution that where it is invented, and they are then free to share it with the persons who invented it. So you need this. It's particularly important in the Indian context to encourage people by putting proper technology licensing procedures in place. And that's not just rules, it also means evaluating. So if some inventor comes to this office and says, I have an idea that I've made this progress on, it's the job of this office to put a value on that and to determine whether it's really worth the while to go through a patenting process. And this has turned around. If you look at what happened in the United States between the year this act was passed, the Bayh-Dole Act in 1980, and now, and what happened before it, it's believed that this turned around the whole invention process and made academics the center of invention, where it had earlier moved away to the corporate sector. Now you can see the HOD is doing so much. Obviously the HOD, you can send him your condolences, but he can do less if he organizes himself well. So go to the next slide. I will wrap up with this. Okay, so the next slide shows how within a department decentralization takes place. So the HOD in the earlier case was looking after instruction, but now that job has gone off to the faculty. Okay, so the faculty now are doing all the activities relating to students and their peers. So things like setting up research centers, student recruitment, advising, all these are co-curricular activities, and faculty development, recruitment and promotion, getting research grants. These are all now administered by small committees of faculty. So the faculty are now deciding that if somebody is up for promotion, who is to be recommended. Now, head of department can say, come back to me with more information. I'm not convinced, but he cannot overrule. It's like President of India. So, and similarly as it goes up, the chain. So all the decisions are made at the level of the faculty development committee, as regards promotion and tenure. Where even I know in Indian institutions, the head of the institution has to be involved with every single recruitment, even though they are not competent to do so, one, and secondly, it takes up an enormous amount of time of theirs to do this. It just doesn't make sense when it can be done much more efficiently by people who know you. Now, frankly, I mentioned this to when Mr. Sibal was HRD minister a few years ago. He had come to Stanford, and I showed him, I didn't show him this slide, but I talked through the ideas with him. And he said that we are not mature enough as an institutional framework to give so much trust down the line. My view is if you take that attitude, you will never reach the trust down the line. It's like student evaluation. There's a great reluctance to give any weight to student evaluation. Whereas what we should be having is that the professor's dashboard should contain every single evaluation, so that when it comes to evaluating the performance of the teacher, all this information is available. And what has been found is everywhere students have the same motivations. And some of them will do that, give bad evaluation, but on the whole it works out. So you can see the effect of decentralization in how it can make things much more efficient. Let me put maybe one more slide. Again, this is more a fun slide rather than connected to governance. Can you go back a bit, please? One more. Yeah, keep going. Yeah, stop there. I have been pushing to Pawan that Indian institutions don't get enough money. So although I'm sure I'm not speaking to very friendly people on this point on my left.
We would if we could.
Yeah. I want to show you some data on money, and let me put it in a context that if you want to run a proper research institution where each faculty member has 6 to 8 doctoral level students working with him on average, it's going to cost money, because you have to then make sure that that doctoral student is well equipped with proper resources and labs and so on. And so what this chart does, it gives you some comparisons across the BRICS, and I've separated out is all US dollar purchasing. One second, let me just see if it's purchasing power adjusted.
Parity.
Yes, it's purchasing power adjusted, no, excuse me, it is not purchasing power. I apologize. It is not purchasing power adjusted. Okay, and you see the numbers across the tiers. So what you see is that in Brazil, which is largely, it's very much like India. The private sector is large. It occupies the bottom tier of quality. The good institutions are all in the public sector. So you have the top tier where the per student spending is $9,000. It comes down to $6,000 in the middle tier and $3,500 in the bottom tier, and the average is $5,000. Below that you see in brackets 30, 50, 30. That is the I believe that is the percentage of institutions that are top tier. No, sorry, only 10% are top tier, 40% are middle tier, 50% is lower tier. Okay, I think 30% might be the private public share. So let's hold on that. If you come now to China, you see that for their top tier, which makes up 5%, they're spending $10,000 on average. And the very best ones, like Tsinghua and Beijing, Tsinghua is spending $51,000 per student per year. The Beijing University is spending about $48,000. Middle tier is $6,000 and lower tier $3,000, average $4,300. India, the top tier is $6,000, and that's 2% of the institutions. IIT is $8,000 per student per year. Middle tier is $1,500. So it is the public-private share. So 30% is public. Okay, and then the low tier is $1,000 per student. Russia similarly is 12,637. The US is $25,000 at the top tier, but look at MIT, $216,000 per student per year. Stanford is also over 200,000. Middle tier 15, lower tier 6,000. Now you may ask how much of that is covered by tuition. Okay, so in the case of the United States, at the lower tier, the tuition coverage is almost negligible. So roughly tuition at the lower tier may be about $2,000 per year, but the spending is $6,000. So the subsidy from the state is $4,000. The middle tier, the tuition jumps to about half, and it stays at that level for the top tier. So the point is that the government in the United States, level of the state government, of course, because there also it's a federal system, make sure that a lot of resources are available for the lowest tier. So actually, if you look at it, of course the spending goes up by the state at higher tier, but not at that ratio. So whereas in India, you find that the public support of the higher tier goes up disproportionately as the quality of the institution goes up, very much more. Here in the United States, it's a much more phased increase, and most of the resource in aggregate, because most of the students are at the lower tier, is spent at the lower tier. So in a community college, for example, it's only $15 per credit to register for a class. That means one course of 3 credits costs one student $45. You can take one course in one term and continue that way. There's no requirement that you must take a minimum of number of courses. To register for an institution, you can take even 0 courses, provided you take at least one course every 2 years or something like that. This makes it very, very economical, and not only that, the state is putting in so much money. 6,000 out of 6,000, 5,000 is put in by the government to make sure the class size is small, because these are the people who need upgradation. So one of the very positive features of the 5-year plan, higher education chapter, is this emphasis on the middle and lower tier. It may not be music to the IITs present here, but I think it's a very good initiative to spend a bulk of the resources in bringing these up, because without these you're never going to have a good quality infrastructure. You know, I mean, I just came from Sri Lanka, where I spent a week in Colombo, and the big stark difference is in the quality of the lowest level manpower, which is very, very high over there, because you know they have 100% have completed school. So it's like Kerala. I mean, the same situation Kerala. So anyways, that was more for fun than for governance. Plug to my colleagues to make more funds available. And with that, let me stop, since I've gone over time. We can take a break for some questions.
Yeah, I think so. You know, Rafiq, it may be interesting to convert the slide, the funding slide, on purchase point parity basis. The differences will be much less stark than one, of course. And secondly, while this is very interesting, and in fact, initially in the first draft of the 12th 5-year plan, we had put these numbers in the document, and then we removed them. We only indicated that, yes, these numbers we need to relook at. But if you look at percentage of GDP spent on higher education, it is one of the highest in the world. You know, which goes on to suggest that the country is devoting a lot of resources on higher education, disproportionate to the stage of development at which we are. And I think Of course, we will continue to claim more resources since I look after higher education. But the need for spending them more efficiently and effectively is very, very urgent, which is the core. Second is the differences between, the very top institutions, MIT spending and Tsinghua you mentioned, they are way, way above the average. So I think, and a lot of these resources that they are basically spending, I believe, they are their own efforts. They are not coming really, their own efforts at fundraising, that they are able to garner so much of funds, which even the Indian situation allows our top institutions to garner. On the issue of this entire presentation, I think several of the institutions which are present here today, they are new institutions. You are in the process of putting together the within the institution, what will be the governance structure. And it might be useful to see and not really copy what is there in another IIT, but to look at what are the international good practices, what fits in your vision of an institution, and do it accordingly. In fact, many of the institutions globally are undergoing institutional transformation, relooking at their even established institutions. So I think it is a very useful, presentation overall. But we can now go on to the questions. We can take a few questions from maybe Central University, Rajasthan.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes.
Our Central University of Rajasthan is getting a lot of grants from central government, and we have started our campus, new campus. Out of new 15 universities, the only Central University of Rajasthan has entered in the new campus. My one point with the efficiently engage with the market point that was raised by Dr. Dossani, that in my opinion, personal opinion, if we go for raising more funds through our efforts also, and the fee structure of our university is little bit low. This is the faculty driven approach, not the managerial approach. So if we raise the fee, I think we will get better intake in our university, but with simultaneously we should also obey the rule of inclusive growth also. So some concession to poor people should be there, but 50% students should give a higher fees so that the higher category students can come, and then we will be more market efficient and our placements will be more better. What is your opinion regarding?
This is music to the ears in the Planning Commission. And in fact, while in case of IITs, the fees are, to some extent decided by the IIT Council, and which have been raised very significantly in recent past. But in case of central universities, one of the concerns that we had was, and I heard, I don't want to name our university, where they have kept fee levels at the level of Delhi University, which is very unfortunate. I think even Stanford University is not able to manage their finances well, and they had to, I think, in your presentation you mentioned about 8% cut.
Yes.
So I think we need to be aware of the future that faces us, and have a fee policy which is reasonable. And this idea of ensuring that the poorest of the poor are not deprived by providing institutional financial assistance is a very good idea. At the national level also, there are large number of scholarship schemes that assist various category of students. So I think it is the way forward as far as the fee policy is concerned. Would you like to make a comment on this?
No, I mean I agree with what you said. I think.
Ma'am, would you like to say something?
No, let's hear some more. At the end I'll want to hear what some responses.
Can I ask a question, Dr. Agrawal, from SK Bhopal?
Yes.
Yeah. When we make recruitment rules for our non-faculty positions, don't you think it's high time that we should go by this faculty-driven model and look for registrars and deputy registrars, etc. From within faculty, or recruitment rules permit faculty members to join on those positions. They will have probably better ownership of the institution, as well as we will get the advantage of their teaching skills also. Is there, because I see what Rafiq sir has mentioned, it is a lot of decentralization in faculty-driven institutional governance model. Sir, your comment on that?
I think, Rafiq, would you like to comment on
whether, no, I absolutely agree with you. I think this is the way to go. It keeps costs down. You know, these are not jobs that are that sophisticated that you must have, it's not rocket science. But I think the main focus of an academic institution should be on how do I prepare, as I said in the beginning, people for teaching. You know, you recruit people not for their research skills, you recruit them for their teaching skills. And keeping that in mind, then you have to make sure that the appropriate level becomes registrar, and not like young people building their careers, that you add one more admin responsibility. You know? So I think if those are taken care of, I absolutely agree with him.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Yes, IIT Patna wanted, yes, sir.
Yes. Hello? Hello?
Yeah, I want to tell Mr. Parveen Agarwal, you have been telling a lot about IITs, and I was also since the last 40 years at the first IIT, that is Kharagpur. My view regarding the running IIT is very satisfactory. It has a decentralized system, faculty-driven model, and I think it's working well. Only thing what I see, now I am doing some service to new IIT. New IIT should be supported more at this stage, because this is at the establishing stage. We have the modern equipment, modern system, whatever is available. Only thing the government should support adequately so that new IITs come up well, and in due course it will be considered from the facility point of view the better than even the older IIT. Because we have got opportunity to develop new institution at this time where all modern equipment we have, where the new IIT is still to procure that. Because we have to buy the new system. We cannot go to the old, what the older IIT have. So from that point of view, we are better off. But only thing I want, like these days, a lot of things like fundraising by the new IIT, I think that may be a little problem, because we have younger faculty, and at the same time, our establishment is also not very long. Our new campus, we are giving a lot of, support to have that. And then it takes time. I mean, we are at the building stage, development stage. So the government should support, planning commission should think of providing adequate funds for the new IITs so that they can flourish well, and in due course, in next maybe 5 years or 10 years, we also start producing few thousands of engineers from the new IIT as well. So this is my submission, that the planning commission should support new IITs, which has been about now. Now they are more than older IIT. 9 new IITs have come up in last 4 or 5 years. And I think I am associated with IIT Patna now, so I feel that is doing very well. Only thing, the government support is needed more, so that we should be able to develop as a new IIT like any other education system abroad and all that. Thank you.
Yeah, point well taken. Thank you.
May I respond? I mean, on an overall issue, I think we are slightly moving away from the governance issue into the last slide. I think we all love that. I mean, I would actually bring the two together. Given the kind of funding that goes, public funding, I will not say government funding, planning commission or any other, I would say public funding that goes mainly into the top tier, and given that only you were yesterday citing some
3%, less than 3%.
less than 3% of students are in these institutions. The question, I mean, it is really an RTI question, if I can phrase it in that manner, is that where is the accountability? For 3% of the population, the proportion of the higher education funding that is going, the disproportionate amounts are going for this 3%. Where is the accountability for this money? This is a question if I am asking as a taxpayer. I pay my taxes and I pay for the student in IIT. I pay because they are institutions of the best kind. I'm saying IIT only in a very metaphoric sense. Let's say top tier universities, whether they are central universities or central institutions. The question that is being asked here is really because the lowest funding that we are talking about in your funding slide is actually not public at all. 60% of students, if I've been informed, are in private institutions. Now, private institutions are of all kinds. I mean, they may be offering ordinary BA courses, or they may be offering the engineering and medical courses. Now, the fact that they are unregulated, quote unquote, speaks to the governance. You spoke on the internal governance of the institution, and I think here the public-private differential is very stark, because the public institutions enjoy a lot of trust. Trust from the students as well as from the funding public. The funding public. Again, I say that I don't say government or planning commission or Pawan Agarwal or Deputy Chairman Planning Commission or the Prime Minister. I say it's the tax-paying public. Nobody asks. They just say you take the best students since you have a very stringent admission or intake norm. And we leave it to you. So really the issue of faculty decentralized governance within will improve the governance of the institutions from within. That's the way I'm looking at it, of the top tier institutions. Whereas the real, the challenges lie in the private, where the public or the regulations of any kind do not touch them, except for sending their students, our students, into a common exam held by a university which affiliates them. There is no other way to decide what kind of governance do they have, what kind of management do they have. So seriously, if we are looking at institutional governance, yes, I would start with actually asking this very, very harsh question, the accountability question. We ask this very routinely for Narega funds, let's say, for job schemes or for doles that are given to the poorest of the poor or the public distribution system. But we never do that of institutions. Once an institution is funded, faculty is hired, we say, IIT hai, achha hi hoga. IISc aa rahe hai, badhiya hoga. And the students also come with a lot of expectations and trust. So the internal governance, I would say, is neither management driven nor faculty driven. So that's where my challenge lies today, that what am I asking, what kind of questions am I asking not from giving more funds or stopping more funds, but where should these public funds go? In the top tier institutions, I think typically they go for infrastructure, typically. That the new institutions will be given buildings and funds, etc.
Because we set up very large number of institutions in the 11th plan, so this difference appears to be more stark now.
Yeah.
But
I'm saying I'm ending on a very anecdotal note only for you, Rafiq. The other day, there was a discussion, a very general kind of discussions on exactly this issue. Given the resource crunch at the national level, there is of course now competitive bidding for public funds by sectors, across sectors, and Pawan knows very well, he's a valiant warrior for the higher education sector. He fights for more money but then that money has to come from somewhere else. So a very cynical comment was made about, okay, the All India Institute of Medical Sciences, which has completely decentralized governance within the system. They have 6 or 7 centers of the highest centers of excellence in various super specialty disciplines. And from a very accounting perspective, paracetamol bought by center A costs 2 rupees, paracetamol bought by center B costs 4 rupees. Paracetamol bought by center D costs 3.5 rupees or 5 rupees or whatever. Because it's a public institution, nobody will go and say it will cost you 20 rupees. A stent which is shown as a US patented stent is priced at 55,000 or 65,000. An Indian stent is priced at 25,000. I'm saying this because the institution is audited, it's a public institution, it delivers top quality care, top quality people, top quality research, and it is governed completely internally by a board. It's an act of parliament, they are independent, autonomous, and scrutinized. They have public scrutiny. But for whom are they delivering? That is a question which I would ask all the top tier institutions, and that's the kind of questions which are going to be posed more and more as funds become more and more scarce in the public domain. That is this is what I'm looking at in the next 5 to 10 years, that while we consolidate, the new institutions will be funded. But the older institutions will then have to answer more and more questions for the public funding that they are competing for.
And then you have the RTI and
that is on its own, on the hiring. On the narrow issue of whether they should be in a faculty driven, faculty should be doing administrative tasks. Many of us who have been in the civil service feel that a lot of quality time is wasted, like you said about the condolence message, in doing heavy duty administration, only because in our government public funded institutions, higher education or elsewhere, hospitals even, the rewards of being good and outstanding is that you move further and further away from your core competence, that you seek quote unquote administrative positions because those are promotions, not because it's a very rare professor who refuses to become a vice chancellor. So the rewards, the incentive system within our I would say professions of excellence lie in you build your reputation on your professional competence and your superior standing in research or being well known in the world, but across the board, and we've seen that most in the sciences, where just because you happen to be a top quality scientist, you have to be made the director of CSIR, let's say. Let's say, I'm saying that because it's seen as a reward and therefore sought after. But then who is, in the end, we are not getting a top quality administrator, and we are also losing out on a superior quality brain, which can contribute probably to world body of knowledge. But that's a system which we have built up over the last 50, 60 years, and somewhere we need to look at the incentive systems within the government. That's literally like outsourcing. You outsource routine tasks, just like you tell an accountant you have a director of finance who looks after all your accounts and your funding, especially since you do no fundraising. Money is just given to you. Money is just given to you, so let somebody just look after it, make sure that the audit trails are there and somebody looks after that. And likewise, if it's just a question of managing certain housekeeping tasks, financial aid disbursement, keeping tabs on who gets what, or even in admissions or results management, they outsource the tasks at a certain level, and then so that it frees up your time. That's a midway solution to managerial versus faculty. I mean, that's one area where we've really not arrived at a solution which is good for the system as well as good for the institution. So, I mean, this is my present state, and I really have to thank you very much for this. Please do continue.
Yes.
I unfortunately had committed my time elsewhere, but I would have.
No, thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you all very much.
Thank you.
So, now I think we will, because it has already been 2.5 hours, we won't hold you for another maybe 45 minutes. Huh? And we can quickly switch over to the next topic, technology development plan for the institutions. and we in any case are using technology. And
this is a short presentation.
This is a short presentation, and then take question answers and wind it up.
Okay. Thank you. I do want to comment on that IITs are faculty driven, but looked at from outside, given that they don't take much responsibility for raising large amounts of funds, the funding part certainly is not faculty driven. There's an outside element in terms of that, and that's very important. You see, if you look at German history in higher education, what you find is that the system of faculty control has pretty much ruined the institutions. So although I've so far always been, in my presentation so far, have taken the view that the faculty-driven approach is better, in Germany, it's been the opposite. There's so much faculty control without any of the responsibility for financing the institution. Because the professors are in charge, they are able to, and they also are members of parliament and they sit on committees, they are able to make sure that adequate funding comes to the institutions, but then cut off of the financial responsibility, the quality of the institution has been under severe pressure. There's massive overstaffing, students are not well looked after, there's no accountability to the students. So without the finance model, I don't think the piece works. You can't have a faculty-driven institution without complete accountability, including for finances. So that was the point. So let me move on to the technology part. This is a very short presentation. If there's time, I'd like to go on to the instructional design. Perhaps what I can do is to motivate this a little bit. I would, rather than come up, I was going to go through some areas to discuss. Can you go to that, that doc file, please? The one that IR115. That was earlier a link from one of the presentations, but let me show you why I'm putting that up. So the reason I'm putting this up is to give you some idea of instructional design. This is just a course outline for one of the courses that I have taught. So if you can go to page 2, please. Go down to page 2. Yeah, stop there. Course competencies targeted. So at the beginning of the outline, when you prepare it, and this should be enabled digitally so that there's no way out. You see, what I mean by this is that every institution should insist that the course outline be prepared in a template provided by the institution online. And there's no other way that a course outline will be accepted. And the advantage of this is many. One of the advantages is that then you can take a small abstract at the beginning and automatically put it into the course catalog. So you don't need to now create a fresh description of the course. The idea of this is that if you insist on it happening through a course catalog provision, and most LMSs, learning management systems like Moodle, which you all must be aware of, have this facility. The only difference is that it is not insisted on in most institutions. So the first thing in preparing a course outline is to list the course competencies. So here you can say, this is a course that I teach on development issues in South Asia. So the course competencies targeted are understand the trends in socio-economic conditions from independence up to the present time. So that's a broad course competency that the students at the end must understand these trends, and within that they must build hypotheses on the roles that political governance, identity and socio-economic institutions play in a country's development. So that's the first course competency, and like that there are 3 more. Understand the establishment and influence of factors on selected outcomes, understand anomalies like the Kerala development experience, for example, and relate them to the framework. So there are 4 course competencies. Typically, there will be up to 5 broad course competencies in a course. Now once this is specified, just keep going down, please. Go right to the end. Just go all the way to the end.
Control and
Yeah, just show that table up there. Yes, stop there. Stop. Yeah. Okay, so what you see in that last table is these 4 course competencies, which I've called CC1, CC2 for lack of space. But ideally, in a digital environment, you should be able to hover your cursor over that and see it. And in the columns, you put the learning outcomes. So you see Sec 1, LO1, Section 1, Learning Outcome 1. So learning outcome, I'll show you some examples of what you expect from that section that you're teaching. And within that cell, you see K, C, C, AP. So that's explained by Bloom's taxonomy of cognition. That is, at what level are you learning? Are you learning at the level of facts or information, which is knowledge? Are you learning at the level of comprehension? Are you able to learn at the level of application of the knowledge? Is the student learning at the level of analyzing that knowledge, level of synthesizing the knowledge, or level of evaluation? So these are higher orders of knowledge. And you can, if you're not familiar with Bloom's taxonomy, you can look it up online. So what the teacher is required to do is to fill up each element in this grid. That to what extent is this learning outcome, if fulfilled, addressing course competence number 1? Is it, and I put down K as knowledge. See, so I put different entries here, and online I would do the whole thing. Okay, so this is the second step. So first you create your course competencies and your learning outcome, then you create this grid. Now let me show you the learning outcome. So now just go up to page, page 2. At the bottom of page 2. Yeah, stop there. Not section 2, page 2, go up.
Next page, yeah.
No, upper, go up.
Space 3.
Yeah, stop there. Is that page? No, go up, go up.
The next is the page 2.
Yeah, this one. There, stop there. Stop. So you see section 1, learning outcomes 1. So on top of that, I've given the different, what we will cover in that section, It looks like measures of development and measures of political change and so on. And the learning outcome I'm hoping the students get out of it is that they understand, number 1, they understand the different measures and definitions of economic development. Then below, understand relationship between development and income, between distribution income. So like that, I specify learning outcomes. So this, as you can see, the first one is largely a knowledge component. It's not really comprehension, synthesis. I'm defining for them how do you measure development. So that's why I put K in that matrix, if you remember. So that explains how I relate learning outcomes to course competencies. And the next piece, so just go down a little bit to the top of second page. No, down to the top of second page. You went the other way. Go down. Go down till you see the table. This is on page 3. Yeah, that's the table. Stop there. Stop. Okay, now what you see is, and this again must be digitally enabled, is you see that what is my instructional strategy? What is the teaching method? So in the first column, each learning outcome is numbered over there, and you, again, if you hover your cursor over it, you should be able to see the full learning outcome. And now I have many choices I have of learning strategy. I can give lecture, I can have a controlled group discussion, so you see that on the first row. I can do a multimedia presentation to the students, I can do journal writing, that is, I can ask them to stop and go through reflecting on the experiences in an online journal. And finally, I can engage them in group discussion. So the entries in the cell are the number of minutes. So I've decided that I'm going to spend 35 minutes on addressing learning outcome through a lecture, 10 minutes through a controlled discussion, 0 on multimedia presentation, 10 on journal writing, and 20 on group discussion. And the next column is the sequence. I'm going to first do my lecture, then the discussion, then the group discussion, and then the journal writing, and total adds up to 75. And so I do that for each learning outcome, and I know how much time I'm going to spend. Now you see, the value of this is it makes you very systematic in the way that you teach, but also importantly is that now this becomes something that can be benchmarked. So it allows the head of department or whoever is reviewing this to say that, you know, this course is meant to address certain element of the full program. To what extent is it contributing? Is it contributing adequately in terms of knowledge, in terms of application? So they look at Bloom's taxonomy and say, how is this relating to the program objectives? Because that's what the head of department is concerned about. So this is the basics of instructional design. And the reason I started with this is to show you that this is so easy. You can just create a few spreadsheets and make it, you can immediately use it in your own institution. You don't need any program. You don't even need Moodle actually to do this. Okay, so with that, let's go on to the PowerPoint. I have only about 4 slides here I'll be presenting, and then we'll wrap up in about 5 minutes. Yeah, go to next slide. Yeah. So what are the arenas at which an institution can intervene in using digital technologies? One is the CRM function. I think many institutions, particularly private ones in India, have done this quite well. Second is the admissions portal. Again, this is something that makes a lot of sense. It should be cross-institutional, so that a student can enter a portal, log into that institution with the password and enter information for that institution. He can also store in that common elements so that he can pick and pull and quickly create in a new format as required by another institution the admissions requirement of the other institution. This is something very amenable to technology. The third one, which is very important and not really found in India, is the user portal. The user portal is both for students and faculty members to be able to keep in this a full record of their progress. Now in the student portal you want 2 kinds of portal, one which is public to the student and one which is private to the student, that the student cannot see. That is, the public to student is what the student can see, where things like his courses, his grades and so on are there. In the private would be that if the teacher and the student have undertaken some discussion about the student and he has been, say, remarked on his grade performance, asked him to do something, some of that information might be just between the teachers to help the student improve. But by and large, about 70–80% of the information about the student would be available on the student's portal. Parents may be allowed to see this as well with the password. For the faculty member, the user portal needs to cover, it's like a LinkedIn page. That's the best way to describe it. All his publications, records of citations, inventions and so on, properly documented with proper video and so on, so that at the time of evaluating the faculty, or if he wants to apply for a job elsewhere, this would be very useful for him. Then the fourth one is the program, and this is at the level of the department, where they can put down the details of the program, what are the courses, again from an instructional design perspective, how it will help. Then the delivery side, which is the learning management system, the discussion forums, the grading, the exam management, all of that will come in the delivery portals. And then finally the content. So that's where I talked earlier about creating resource repositories where content can be shared. On the right side are more of the, you can say, the mechanical aspects of it. Since it should be able to generate reports for business analytics, compliance and for accreditation. For faculty development, the reports, then distance education platforms, and then financial support and ERP. There's a lot, I'm going through it very quickly, but I can explain each one in more detail at some other venue. The next slide, please. So a sample technology development plan takes time. I mean, that's really the point I want to bring out from here. That there's some things like I mentioned about instructional design screens or the admissions portal where you can go very quickly, and CRM, there are lots of packages which are very good. But really it takes time. To have a fully functional ERP across multiple institutions and programs within a large university takes 3 to 5 years. This is based on American experience, but maybe it would be different over here. A fully functional learning management system takes about 2 to 3 years. Providing rich content, that is the content part of it, repository management takes much longer because, as any of you who have used MIT OpenCoursera would recognize, it's very difficult to provide rich content, and that takes 5 to 7 years. In getting the team right takes a very long time. This really should be part of long-term strategic planning. Then bringing in sort of trends such as social networking for brand visibility, marketing, communication, 2 to 3 years, and others. So you can see how difficult it is. And the staffing, next page, next slide. At a minimum, you should start with one faculty director who oversees the whole process, then 1 to 2 IT persons for application, data management, and troubleshooting, and they can also work with the vendors. And training can be part of the faculty development center. Next slide. Okay, I have a workshop here. I don't know if this forum is amenable to a workshop. I put down over here the elements of the faculty development plan that I had put earlier, and I wanted each location to come up with the requirements. So let's say you're designing this for an online presence. What sort of screens should you develop? But I think that is probably out of purview. We're sort of pretty much finished with the time available. Otherwise, normally this takes about half an hour to do. So let me put down my suggestions for what the online screen should contain. And this next slide, please. So this is the last slide. So consistent with, I hope, with our earlier discussion, it should contain the last reviewed 3-year plans, links to quarterly and annual review comments, list of courses taught since recruitment by year, link on each course to student and peer evaluation, research output, publications, citations, inventions, etc., and within that funding raised and received, any additional training and so on done to improve faculty development, then external consulting and MDP, this is for MBA, Management Development Program participation, and institution building and service like PhD students supervised, subsequent record, course curriculum developed, I didn't mention that here, centers established, research centers and funding record. I probably went too fast for you in this section. I thought let me wrap up here and say let's open it up for some Q&A right now if there are any questions on the technology. In terms of budgeting for technology, I think you should budget something like 1% of revenue, probably not more than that. Any queries on the technology side? Actually, this being the last Q&A session, we can open it up generally. Any comments, queries, generally welcome.
Dr. Rafiq, speaking from SPA Bhopal, I don't really have question related with your last session, but I would like to ask another one, but which I'm really, because we come from School of Planning and Architecture, and you have mentioned that in one course there should not be 15 to 20% of industry people coming and teaching that. Do you have any experience of planning and architecture programs, and do you have any comment about that? Because our Council of Architecture in India actually specifies more than 30% or up to even 40% of all classes, including the courses, completely taken by industry people. Your international experience on that?
Yeah, actually, in this case, I do have a perspective in part because I studied it out of interest. My daughter is doing her master's in architecture in the US, and I was wondering why she works so hard. She studies more at the master's level than I studied for my PhD, but as I found out, that's the nature of architectural studies. I mean, she's in her department from 8 in the morning to roughly midnight or 1 o'clock when she catches the train back. So what I found out is that in architecture and law, there's a pretty high percentage of practitioners, but they are given an appointment within the institution, and they are long-term teachers. So they are there, but they participate in the faculty meetings. So it's a deliberate commitment on their part to run a practice on one side, but also be in the institution. And the typical time spent is half and half. So it's not that they are full-time architects who come and just teach one course and then go away. They are deeply integrated into the curriculum. So that's how it is. I don't know how you have organized yourself.
Yeah, we also have some very committed teachers who are there in SPA Delhi for say 20 years, and they are regularly taking classes. But in small towns like Bhopal we are in, and other places like Nagpur or Lucknow, we don't get that kind of committed professionals coming to teach in the institutions so regularly. And but our experience at SPA Delhi was definitely of this kind, as you are mentioning. Thank you. Is there any other question from my colleagues?
No, thank you.
You want to ask? Anybody?
Please.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. We'll go location by location.
Yes. And anybody first have question on that last presentation on technology, use of technology? Any question that I think there is Roorkee, IIT Roorkee?
It's up.
Hands on.
Okay, I don't think we're seeing any hands up anywhere.
No, I saw someone is Sir Mohali, or any question particularly on use of IIT?
Sir, can I ask a question?
Yes, yes, please.
Yes, sir. Sir, I am from Shivaji University again, Kolhapur, Maharashtra. Sir, I think right since the beginning I am there listening to the deliberations given by you. Most of the people who are connected with you are from IIT and from professional architect and all those institutions. My point is, I want you to draw attention towards the conventional universities also, who are very much lagging behind in the technological area which we are discussing right now. I would have been happy if Agrawal sir would have been there to listen to my question, and that is relating to the kind of funding that the different faculties are receiving from the National Commission as well as from the public funding. We see that there is a lot of funding which is driven towards the science and technology and professional faculties, and a lot of ignorance and lot of exclusion is seen towards the social science faculty. So if we really want to use technology and make use of the technology has to be imbibed in the social science faculty also, humanities faculty also. We see there is a lot of dearth of financial funding towards the social science and humanities faculty. I would have been happy if Agrawal would have been there, and my question was actually directed towards Professor Agrawal. Thank you, sir.
Maybe you can convey to him.
Yeah? I'll just, because I think Shivaji University, they were not present in the last this presentation, and it is well acknowledged across the universities that the social science and particularly humanity is in terms of that funding has really on negative side, in the sense there is a much disparity, and the funding towards humanity and social science comparative to central institutions, the technology in the IIT and IIM and other central institutions is much lower. That is well acknowledged even in that 12th plan document, and whole effort is to actually remove this disparity and how to increase funding towards this humanity and other subject across the subject. That is actually one pointed approach in the 12th five plan.
Sir, I have one question.
Yeah, I think Kolkata and Mohali have some questions. Yeah, Kolkata, could you go ahead?
Yes, sir. Sir, I have two questions, sir. One in regard to the last session. That was in the second session. You kindly told us that year fee for management and MIS for HOD's functionalities. So how new institute like our ISERs would be able to work through with both of them? Number one. Number two is how the plan document, 12th plan document, is thinking about the FDP. Because in the first session we had learned that it was dealt or totally discussed with the FDP. Now about MDP, whether there is any plan in the 12th plan. Thank you, sir.
Your first question was how to do both ERP and MIS through using, or how to sequence it?
Yes.
Yeah, I think the priority should be the ERP, even though the MIS is far more important in some ways, but until you have an ERP and the fee engines and all are worked out, you can't really do things like exam management and linking with student databases. So that would be my sequencing in terms of priority. When it comes to the question of faculty development, how much is the 12th plan giving emphasis to this?
No, sorry. I'm so sorry.
12th plan, what is the emphasis on faculty development?
One of them.
On faculty development, there is an overriding priority. In fact, a national mission is being planned to put together all programs under faculty development under one umbrella and scale it up very significantly. The Honorable Minister for HRD, MOS, Minister of State, Mr. Shashi Tharoor, is the chair of that committee which is looking at it. And I think we are getting a lot of traction, new ideas are there. So as far as resources are concerned, that will not be an issue. The challenge is that how do we attract talent, and in any case there is a time lag issue. So even if we are able to create a pipeline of postgraduate and doctoral programs, to feed into the faculty positions in future, it will take several years. So I think the challenge is that what do we do in the interim, and use of technology more effectively is one way forward. But yes, this is an issue that is receiving high priority.
Shivaji University asked about particularly the funding disparity among social science and other institutions.
Regarding technological use.
Technological use.
And Madam from Shivaji University wants some question from you.
Question? No, I think, what we will do is, because I think we have had 3 hours of this continuous session on 12th plan, and the paradigm shift that we are bringing in the 12th plan, and the way we are moving towards its effective implementation, we can have another session on it, and it might be very useful. Meanwhile, it will be good if you kindly go through the website of the Planning Commission and read for yourself what is written in the text of the plan document. Because I think, as Madam pointed out, Secretary, Planning Commission pointed out, there are several paradigm shifts in the 12th plan, and obviously the challenge is that there is only a text of intention of the government, but how do we translate it into action? Fortunately, we are moving forward, and the ministry and agencies are with us in moving forward on implementation of the plan, and we will obviously require assistance and support of all of you to move forward. One of the paradigm shift is that instead of looking at institution, look at a system, what is happening in each state. And when we talk of state, central institutions are part of the plan of that state higher education, and the role these central institutions can play as exemplary institutions to support the development of state higher education system, that is one. Second is, rather than institutional support alone, provide some funding and significant funding for specific activities, and faculty development is one such activity. Use of technology was there in the 11th plan, it is being continued, and there are several other initiatives which focus on one particular aspect. We know that if bulk grant is provided to an institution, then how do they use it is entirely left to them. Now, if we want to focus on a particular activity, at least in the 12th plan, we want to give separate pot of money for a particular activity. Let this idea be socialized within the institutions, and let us find out good models of implementing those ideas, and then take it forward in the subsequent plan. Subsequently, we may not require separate pot of money. Once there is enough enthusiasm and interest in the institutions to take up their activity by themselves, we may not require separate pot of money. Internationalization is one of those areas. Fostering social responsibility is another area. developing teaching learning support systems. I think your entire issue of faculty development, going beyond what is being done by the academic staff colleges, is another area. So many such ideas are there. In the plan document, the ministry is working on details. We are basically working together with the ministry and other agencies to see that robust implementation plans for all of that are developed. And we look forward for your support. I think we can close the session. I may, just keep you informed that the next session in the same series will be on 25th on 25th March, and this time, 25th March, this time,
25th March is holiday.
Holi. Let us see.
It's holy day, not holiday.
Holiday. It's holiday. No, we are not aware of that. Anyway, we'll have to relook at it, because we'll. I think we need to wind up. Patna.
Yes. I'm Dr. B. Sahai, professor in mechanical engineering at IIT Patna. A long time back, I used to work at IIT Kanpur, and we used to have a lot of projects for our faculty members to encourage our young faculty. And right now, I am struggling hard that, it very much depends upon for example, Aeronautical Development Agency. I used to know Kota Harinarayan, and he was very kind to us in giving projects and other things for faculty development, research, and funding. But nowadays, it all depends upon personal contact, and there is no, like Planning Commission doesn't take any effort in there is so many projects going on, larger projects, of which we would certainly like to contribute something there. But there is no such thing right now. There is no connection. I don't see any talk about it.
I think that's for you.
No, I think, personal contacts in attracting funding are always very important, particularly when it comes to research funding. I'm not sure what specific point you are making here in terms of the role of the Planning Commission, but we can talk about it offline and get your ideas how we can move forward.
Actually, we have a pool of people, research workers, and the Planning Commission should know all the IITs and the pool of professors and technologists. So definitely, the authorities can take recognition of this and can make contacts with us also, so that we are not just running around where to find funding and other things.
All right, I think point well taken. I think we need to conclude now, and let me thank Dr. Rafiq Dossani for giving a marathon session to all of us. Let us all, give a big clap to the sessions. I think it has been the longest session on the video mode in this series. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. You've been a good audience.
Thank you. Only professor and